Chapter 388. Depraved. Gelt did say this word. When he clashed with Gelt, Luoya ignored some details due to his inner anger. One of them was the meaning of depraved. The youth originally thought that Gelt called the Gulan Daer depraved because of the appearance of the giant skeleton, but after discussing with Paitila and others, Luoya suddenly felt something was wrong. Savior. Regarding this question, Paitila was silent for a moment before shaking his head, showing a puzzled look. The ancient Mother Earth recalled the past and said so. On the other side, the witch narrowed her scarlet eyes and ridiculed. Witch, are you provoking me? Hearing Paitila's angry retort, Altacia exaggeratedly stroked her chest and ran to Luoya's side, then whispered, "You're not a princess but a queen, right? And you're the one who provoked me first, right?" Facing Luoya's unmoved retort, the white-haired witch showed a dissatisfied expression, while Paitila stared at her angrily. After wasting a lot of time, Luoya pulled the conversation back to the main topic. Generally, there are two kinds of concepts. One is the depraved gods who pursued power after Shiya's death. The other is the pitiful creatures who were influenced by the Savior's depravity. That is the difference between active and passive. After listening to Altacia's words, Luoya couldn't help but ponder. From his subjective point of view, it was impossible for the Gulan Daer to actively deprave when he was alive, and from an objective point of view, this point was also the same. Therefore, the Gulan Daer should be innocent, but the giant's bloodline called him a depraved. Did it mean that his life and even his death had something to do with the Savior? In Shiya's history, there weren't many races that liked to record their past in various ways. The giants mostly passed down their history orally, and there was a high probability of mishearing or misunderstanding when passing down a story. By the time someone actually summed up the history in a book, it would probably be long gone. After asking around, Luoya, who didn't get any constructive opinions, dismissed the discussion among the gods. He decided to find a way to search for books in this area in the future. After a rest, the teenager walked out of the room and went to the banquet hall to prepare for the celebration. As a result, he saw Paul, who was wearing a strange armor, explaining something to the onlookers. Oh, the patterns on it are so beautiful. Luoya, who was well versed in history, had heard of the Forest Legion of the ancient Austin Empire. It was formed during the Empire's most powerful period, mainly to deal with the beast tide in the forest area of the Empire. In the early days of the Empire, humans adopted a defensive war, hoarding food and closing the city. But with the development of the Empire, the expansion of the soldiers, the improvement of weapons and equipment, and strength, people gradually didn't want to take a defensive position. Every year, they were besieged for 1 or 2 months. The Forest Legion was born to turn defense into offense. This was the first time in human history that the large-scale beast tide, which was rated as the same level as natural disasters such as floods and earthquakes in the past, was successfully eliminated. There was no doubt that it was a milestone and a symbol of the peak of human civilization. However, it could also be said to be the peak of the ancient Austin Empire. The stories of heroes were no longer told by people. The descendants of the frontier knights gradually became addicted to sensual pleasures, and the pursuit of fame and fortune became the goal of the later generations. Humans lost their unity, and became a pile of loose sand amidst the increasingly intense internal strife. All kinds of corruption began to proliferate, and in the end the entire empire became rotten. When the ancestors of Ald watched the glory of the empire fade in the dark, what kind of feelings did they have in their hearts? Forest fairies. The name of this armor should be given by the designer at that time according to the fairy tales of the fairies who came and went without a trace in the forest. But in Luoya's ears, it was very strange, especially when the young boy saw Paul doing bodybuilding exercises to show off his muscle-strengthening ability. Oh, this kind of camouflage can be activated while moving? He felt that something was wrong. What exactly was it? Wait a minute, in the original work, Paul did summon this armor, but that was when he was close to the 3rd year, right? How could it be so fast in the real world? If he thought about it this way, it seemed that his speed of improvement was also much faster. After Luoya's actions were different from the original work, everyone in the eye of the recorder seemed to have improved faster than the original work. They were already favored by the heavens, but they became more and more demonic. Luoya didn't know how to explain this. The young boy blinked and fell into deep thought. On the other side, as students from other departments in the academy came to visit, Paul's side also became noisy. "Student Paul, we are the Curse Research Department belonging to the Curse School. Can you let us take a closer look at this perfect armor?" Looking at the members of various departments in the academy, the young boy who suddenly became a dark horse in the Challenger Cup competition didn't know what to do for a while. The nearby faction members were also unprepared. Facing the outsiders who kept making requests, Paul became a little embarrassed. "Students from various departments visiting, please abide by the order of Tsang Hall." As a participant of the Green Rose faction, Paul Aikman is currently not accepting any interviews. His spell and equipment are also confidential matters before the end of the competition. Please understand. Seeing that one of the ring-bearers, Luoya, came forward, the students who made all kinds of outrageous requests stopped and dispelled the idea of making a big news. The crowd gradually dispersed. Paul, who was relieved, looked at the young boy in front of him who blocked the crowd for him. He felt warm in his heart and hurriedly thanked him. "It's normal. Most people are like this when they are suddenly surrounded. It will be fine after a while. Can you let others wear this thing?" Hearing Luoya's question, Paul smiled bitterly then explained, "I see. The magical weapon of the ancient Austin Empire in the Second Era was the achievements of most of the top curse research in human history. If it could be successfully replicated by Paul, it would be of great significance to promote the current curse equipment, especially now when the mutants were restless." After asking Luoya at the award ceremony not long ago, Melty proved that she was not joking. She really joined the Green Rose faction. As a senior and one of the members of the Academy's orchestra, the talented girl with good temperament was warmly welcomed and quickly integrated into the group. As an outsider of the Academy, Elisa wasn't allowed to live in the Blue Hall. This was because it would violate the Academy's rules. Usually, it would be fine if she was only a member of the faction, and no one would speak of this matter. But today, a large group of outsiders had come, so it would be very dangerous for Elisa to show her face. The helpless young boy took a sip of wine and celebrated with Paul and Gerlach. However, to his surprise, Paul didn't eat and drink as usual at today's banquet. Instead, he looked a little strange. "And, Senior? Junior Luoya, I'm here as the representative of the Aikman family. Thank you for your help to family member Paul Aikman. Because the Purple Rose faction's banquet has just ended, it seems that I didn't have time to inform you in advance. Please forgive me," the black-haired young boy said with a smile on his face. He cooperated well with Lillian's official tone. In the eyes of outsiders, it was completely polite. As for Paul, the agent didn't participate in the conversation between the two. He just pulled a chair and put it next to Luoya's seat. "And you can actually use the kingdom source substance like this. This is really beyond my expectation. Your situation is also very rare in the history of our family." Listening to the question and answer between Lillian and Paul, Luoya, who couldn't interrupt, raised his eyebrows. After thinking for a moment, the young boy turned his head and wanted to chat with Gerlach, but before he could speak, the tentative fingers under the table suddenly touched him. In the lively banquet under everyone's gaze, the black-haired girl smiled and held the young boy's hand dexterously. Chapter 389. Amidst the lively banquet, Luoya stared at the gray-haired young man with widened eyes. On the other hand, Gerlach looked dubious. He naturally didn't know what kind of heartbeat Luoya was going through at that moment. "Head, what's wrong? Why is your face so red?" "Oh, I see. It has indeed gotten hotter in the past few days." As the person who was the furthest away from Luoya geographically, Lillian could only spend time with the young man in the academy and couldn't see him in public. This could be considered a major disadvantage. But Lillian also had her own advantages. She had Paul as a top-notch insider. In a situation where the other young ladies couldn't attend due to faction affairs, Lillian arrived first as Paul's relative. The feeling of sneaking ahead was undoubtedly exhilarating, especially under the watchful eyes of everyone. Before this, as her XP was triggered, Lillian could do whatever she wanted to Luoya, whose side effects were reduced. But now the side effects were gone forever. Facing the young man in his normal state, Lillian didn't have the courage to be too proactive. But compared to the passion back then, the warmth between the two of them was enjoyable. Remember this for a second. The black-haired young lady felt this rare happiness. Her purple pupils couldn't help but narrow slightly. She knew that she shouldn't laugh so casually. But the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. And in the eyes of Paul, who was covering for her, this change was even more obvious. It was a peculiar feeling similar to virtuousness, and even a strong maternal instinct. It was an unknown side of her that would only be revealed when she was with Luoya. It was also due to this obvious change that Paul volunteered to be the go-between between Lillian and Luoya. Gazing at the two of them sitting side by side, Paul revealed a smile and lamented. After his discussion with Lillian about the source substance, the nearby crowd had left as if avoiding suspicion. Gerlach had also gone out to drink with his close friends. With no one around, the young lady could finally whisper to Luoya. "Thank you, Senior. You too. Did the preliminary round go well?" The black-haired girl said regretfully. She was still brooding over the fact that she had drawn the grassland terrain in the preliminary round. Luoya couldn't help but laugh. He couldn't help but open his mouth to persuade her. If that's the case, things will be a little difficult. Upon hearing Lillian's unexpected answer, Luoya couldn't help but blink in confusion. The black-haired girl smiled, gently clenched his hand, and whispered in his ear. The girl, whose wish wasn't fulfilled, could only tap Luoya's wrist under the table. Then she couldn't help but sigh. If it's just meeting each other, we can do it every day during class. However, we haven't had many opportunities to meet in private recently. The reason was that as the leader of the faction, they needed to lead the other members of the faction to improve together with them to a certain extent. It felt like a top student helping to tutor others. The improvement of the overall strength of the faction was also an important test for the ring-bearers. Senior sister, Green Rose has just started and needs to improve as a whole to get resources, so I've been quite busy recently. Chapter 390. After 2 rounds of easy matches, the seeded players of the Challengers Cup had basically cleared the contestants with average strength, and Luoya was about to face the agreed battle. To some extent, Luoya, who also had some bloodline problems, understood Selena's feelings very well. But on the other hand, the teenager opposed Selena's solution to the bloodline problem. The Batet family's sacred beast bloodline could be controlled. Luoya had learned this in advance, but the opportunity to control the bloodline was different. Some people naturally learned it as they grew older, and some people learned it in battles with strong enemies. Selena's bloodline talent was extremely high, so it was estimated that the latter was the most likely to control the bloodline. If he wanted to help her, he had to defeat her. This competition was the best opportunity, because the substitute curse vessel of this Challengers Cup competition could let people clearly experience death. The state between life and death was the closest to a real battle. In the crowded arena, Luoya and Selena were at one end of the arena. In the center, the crystal ball in the hands of the tournament organizer, which constantly changed the venue, lit up again, making the audience excited. Under such a battle analysis, the venue selection became the focus of the audience. However, as if God was playing a joke on Luoya, at the last moment when the constantly changing venue crystal ball reached the finish line, the hilly terrain that was originally quite good was replaced before it was locked, turning into a dark rainforest. 1 second, remember. Oh. 50 gold coins. Bet on that little girl. With the efforts of the majority of gamblers, Luoya's odds began to soar. At one end of the arena, the silver-haired girl frowned worriedly. It's very simple. Because the darkness of this secret realm, perpetual night forest, is accompanied by curse power, ordinary night vision spells are very ineffective. TSK, I didn't expect to draw such a place. Should I say that things don't go as planned? Perhaps a few months ago, Luoya would have some concerns about dueling with Selena in such a place, but now it was different because Luoya no longer had 2 ancient gods, but 3. After the announcement of the entrance was made, Luoya and Selena's bodies were surrounded by light. When they opened their eyes again, the black-haired teenager saw complete darkness. After officially entering the competition, Luoya found that the situation in the perpetual night forest was worse than expected. Facing such an unfavorable environment, Luoya did not move a step, nor did he use any spells. Instead, he immediately chose to release the Hydra staff in his hand. The origin form, Disorder, gave Luoya a strong penetrative ability. This was the thing that had left the deepest impression on him in the previous 2 matches. Under this ability that almost ignored defense, 2 strong contestants had been killed in a single blow. However, after carefully studying the principle behind it, Luoya found that the Hydra staff could still be used. With the full infusion of curse power, the Hydra staff emitted a sparkling light. 9 intimidating snakes emerged from the staff and surrounded the teenager as if he was a king. Then, a defensive rock wall emitting a pale yellow curse power was erected at the outermost periphery. In Luoya's eyes, this was the battle that had the hope of reversing the situation of Selena's bloodline. In the girl's eyes, this battle was even more crucial because her strong beast instinct told her that Luoya was the strongest opponent she had ever encountered. Although they had not met for long, as one of the few people who had spoken to her when her bloodline had calmed down, Luoya understood her thoughts and promised to fight with all his strength. What was even rarer was that this arena seemed to be tailor-made for Selena. Passionate hot blood flowed through her body, along with the determination to fight. Her holy beast bloodline was stimulated to the limit by Selena at this moment. With the crisp sound of bones cracking, beast ears and a tail appeared on the girl's body. Her eyes flashed with a bestial light, and the noise in her brain increased. This battle was almost impossible for Luoya to launch an attack. Selena, who had the advantage of the geographical advantage, had long known this. Before entering the arena, the brown-haired girl had predicted that Luoya would adopt a defensive strategy, so she had thought of a strategy in advance. Clear beastly cries continuously sounded from the girl's mouth. Under the deterrence of a holy beast's aura, the magical creatures in the forest began to submit and move under Selena's command. That is too strong. The outcome of this battle is already decided. As expected of the Batet family's once-in-a-century genius, to be able to mobilize so many magical creatures in such a short period of time. The judges of the competition began to express their opinions, and almost all of them thought that Luoya was at a serious disadvantage. However, at the highest point of the ceremonial stage, Antonio, who was listening to the official's high-pitched speech, had a different expression in his eyes. The old man looked at the youth in the arena and blinked, then smiled after a moment. The roars of magical creatures sounded from all directions, and Paytila's outermost defense began to be attacked from all directions. Due to the number of magical creatures, the Hydra protecting Luoya had no choice but to move its huge body and spray its venom outwards. For a moment, the roars and screams of magical creatures filled the air. After the magical creatures in the sky moved, the Hydra could no longer maintain a complete defense. At this moment, the black-haired youth had no choice but to make a move. Against Luoya, who had the king of sacred beasts following him, the magical creatures were completely useless. This was something that Selena already knew. However, even though the magical creatures weren't a threat, they could still cause him to reveal his flaws. The moment Paytila's aura intimidated the magical creatures, the brown-haired young lady in the darkness suddenly activated her bloodline. At this moment, the curse power in Selena's body was like an explosive, violently reacting in a way that was close to self-harming. The brown-haired young lady was only a few hundred meters away from Luoya in the blink of an eye. The young lady's body fell to the ground like a meteor, consecutively chopping off 2 snake heads, and pouncing towards the youth in the center of the formation. It was as if she had taken the head of a general in the midst of thousands of soldiers. At this moment, Luoya seemed to have recovered from his shock. Looking at the astonished youth under the long sword, Selena was almost certain that she had won. However, the next scene that happened made her widen her eyes in shock. Not good. He hasn't lost yet. The all-out attack of both sides clashed head-on just like that. At the next moment, the collision of the curse power shook the entire secret realm, erupting with extreme sound and light. The loud sound of the explosion shook the atmosphere and turned it into a shockwave. The intense light illuminated the forest as if it was daytime. The nocturnal monsters screamed in this upheaval, and the audience outside the arena also exclaimed, "That's..." The silver-haired young lady cheered happily in the audience. After a moment of judgment and verification, the tournament referees announced on the screen, "Oh." In the arena, the black-haired youth looked at the young lady who had collapsed to the ground due to excessive damage and the exhaustion of her curse power, and asked her how she felt. "Are you satisfied? As expected, you purposely attacked me in the end, right?" The black-haired youth said in a flat tone. Selena smiled and narrowed her eyes. Somehow, she felt that he wasn't that annoying. "I feel like I'm full all of a sudden. I don't want to fight anymore." "You can say that." The excited spectators became even noisier after seeing the return of the two contestants. They raised their hands and applauded for the final all-out collision between the two contestants. The medical staff rushed forward and lifted Selena onto a stretcher. Luoya was required to undergo a post-match examination according to the rules. "I've fulfilled my promise, haven't I?" Thinking so, the black-haired youth looked at Selena in the distance and revealed a smile. But what surprised him was that at this moment, the system prompt suddenly sounded. Chapter 391. Ding! Don't refuse AI Liziakot's request tonight. Tonight, I can't refuse AI Lizi's request? And previously, the small suggestions generated by the blessing of the goddess of fate were within the scope of what he could implement. It wouldn't have much impact if he followed the suggestions, but this time, don't refuse AI Lizi's request. This is definitely not okay. Forget it, let's take one step at a time. 1 second. Remember, without the substitute curse vessel being completely damaged, Luoya hardly suffered any substantial damage, so he just checked it a little and left. The young man who walked out of the arena was warmly welcomed by the faction members, and he learned one thing. That was his odds had skyrocketed. As a result, Luoya's odds rose all the way until the beginning of the game. Such high odds made Luoya, who heard about it, stunned. He almost burst into tears for a while. As a seeded player, Luoya's usual odds were only about 1/3, which was pitifully low. This was also the reason why he didn't bet on winning or negative betting time. Thinking that he had tripled more than 100,000 gold coins in one game, Luoya was excited for a while. Judging from this situation, he might be able to pay back the money he owed Xia Luo before the Challenger Cup ended. Now the tournament had reached the top 32. The transfer students of the Country of Knights and Luoya's acquaintances had not been eliminated yet. Even the weakest Paul actually survived 2 rounds with his ability to summon divine armament. The ocean field was generally considered a neutral field. After all, most people had no experience in ocean battles. Originally, the opponent thought that this kind of field was very disadvantageous for both sides. He could win with stronger strength. As a result, he didn't expect Paul to change armor on the spot. He directly transformed into the ancient Austin Empire Navy and exhausted his opponent to death with the advantage of the field and equipment. For Paul's situation, Luoya could only say that he was lucky. He even suspected that this guy had activated some kind of protagonist aura. In contrast, Gerlach on the other side was much more difficult. Although he successfully survived 2 rounds, both rounds were tough battles. For example, in the last street battle, Xia Luo's opponent was a cursemancer who was good at large-scale attack spells. The bloodline ability was to hide the spell fluctuations to a certain extent. After discovering that Xia Luo's golden soul was good at defense, the top student trained by Leinster College decided to hide and make a big move. He wanted to win with full power, but he didn't expect to be attacked at the beginning. Compared with Xia Luo's slightly more interesting game, Nua Ire and Lillian were somewhat similar. They directly defeated their opponents with their strength. As for the transfer students, they each had their own characteristics. Among them, the most eye-catching one was Teresa. She defeated her opponents with spells in both elimination rounds. This year's Challengers Cup was amazing because of the outstanding performance of the first years. Roja and the others led the faction cadres and the transfer students. Out of the 100 or so people who passed the preliminaries, nearly 20 of them made it to the Challengers Cup. In the top 32, they made it to the Challengers Cup. In Xia, the teaching of different places was not uniform. The teaching content of St. Fran Academy in the country of knights and St. Freya Academy in the country of scholars was very different. This led to the situation where 7 people had to start from the first year. For example, Gelt, who had the giant's bloodline, was actually already a 3rd year at St. Fran Academy. Before the arrival of Luoya, these 2 ring-bearers had always followed Purple Rose Lillian's lead. Grimm himself was born in the Austin Empire. Because he believed in the pure blood theory, he became a hardcore supporter of Lillian. Edward, on the other hand, was born in a small country in the buffer zone of the Austin Empire. Naturally, he didn't dare to disobey Her Royal Highness, who might become the next emperor. This time, the 2 ring-bearers also entered the top 32. Edward was the 2nd-seeded player. He was very calm in the previous 2 battles, and was generally favored by the outside world. Paul met Juliana in the 3rd round. This beautiful girl with black hair and red eyes had a far better understanding of dark spells than her level. She was completely at the master level. However, as a conjurer from the country of knights, Juliana naturally had an additional layer of warrior attributes. Her weapon was an ominous heavy sword. However, this girl who seemed to be a vampire was obviously not a pretty face. In the battle with Paul, Juliana's luck was not good. When she drew the venue, she drew the rainforest, which was the most suitable venue for Paul's forest sprite armor. However, what everyone did not expect was that Juliana's curse talent was even more powerful. This kind of wide area search spell was actually not very powerful in terms of spell power, but its operation difficulty was too high. Generally speaking, it required several conjurers to cooperate to complete it. However, Juliana completed it alone with ease. The moment she caught Paul, she performed Shadow Shift and appeared behind him. Then her greatsword flashed and cut Paul in half. Obviously, the protagonist's halo wasn't as magical as imagined in the real world. Although Paul was lucky all the way and even drew the best lot in the venue, luck wasn't omnipotent. Juliana proved with facts that strength was always the most reliable. TSK, what kind of smell is this? After Paul's defeat, another deputy minister of the Blue Rose faction also met with a defeat. However, Luoya was not surprised because Gerlach's opponent was Brittany. The gray-haired youth's legs were shaking as soon as he entered the arena. It would be strange if he could win. Rather than letting others kill him, why not let me do it? Gerlach's guts were shattered when he heard Brittany's words. He was even more convinced that there was something wrong with Brittany's mind. However, based on Luoya's experience, she was probably just not good at language. Under Brittany's threat, the cowardly Gerlach was defeated like a landslide. However, to be honest, this did not have much of an impact on the outcome. In terms of strength alone, Brittany, who had the bloodline of the Valkyrie, could not be defeated by a youth who had just reached level 4 of source rank. In that battle, Stuart drew the desert terrain. His opponent was a foreign participant who had rich combat experience. Both of them were at level 4 of source rank. Then, there was a series of spells that were nothing special but very solid. In the end, Stuart lost. Even after his defeat, he did not take off the black cloth covering his eyes. Could it be that his eyes were not used for battle? Although Luoya advanced to the top 16, Paul and Gerlach had just been eliminated, so it was inappropriate to celebrate. In fact, after returning to the residence, Luoya specially consoled them. After realizing the gap in strength between them and their opponents, they both expressed that they would work harder. After chatting with them, Luoya finally had some free time. However, a question arose in his mind. AI Lizzie did not return with him. Instead, she left with teacher Chris before the end of the competition. Luoya returned to his private area with doubts. He did not expect to hear the sound of firecrackers as soon as he opened the door to the dining hall. Big brother, congratulations on your successful advancement. The black-haired boy stared at the 2 people who were firing the cannons and shooting out colorful paper ribbons. Chris smiled and explained, "That's right. I really didn't expect this. I've never seen this dish before. This is... You guys?" Looking at the silver-haired girl who patted her chest and asked for praise, Luoya was stunned for a while. He looked at the dish in front of him, and his heart was filled with emotions. Thinking of this, Luoya suddenly felt like crying. In order to cover it up, he hurriedly picked up the spoon and took a sip. It's delicious. Hearing AI Lizi's question, Luoya answered decisively, just like any parent who ate a dish cooked by their child for the first time. But after speaking, the youth found that AI Lizi's dish was really delicious. Under the dual psychological and physical enjoyment, Luoya drank nearly half of the soup in one breath. AI Lizi was very happy to see this, and Chris couldn't help but laugh. So that's how it is. At that time, I wanted to make it for your father, but I didn't have the chance to learn it. I didn't expect that after so many years it's actually yours. Hearing Chris's complaint, the black-haired youth didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At the same time, seizing the opportunity when Luoya was touched, AI Lizi hugged the youth's arm and said her request. Big brother, can you let me stay tonight? Chapter 392. At the dining table, AI Lizi seized the opportunity to make a request decisively, while Chris on the other side squinted his eyes and cheered for her in his heart. This time, the behavior of the two was not on the spur of the moment, but they really came prepared. After all, Luoya would advance, and it was not difficult to predict that Paul and others would be eliminated. For this reason, AI Lizi began to practice with Chris a week ago. Under the pleading of AI Lizi, Luoya, who was moved in his heart, agreed almost instantly. After agreeing, the young man remembered the advice of the goddess, and he couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. The puzzled young man decided to wait and see, and put these things behind him for the time being. Chris, on the other hand, talked about Kadia's reply. Well, looking at the date, it was 3 months ago. She said that she thanked me for taking care of you. But to be honest, I don't think I did anything. Are you praising me? Remember it in 1 second if it was according to Dad's thinking. It should be just a polite reply now. The relationship with Teacher Chris is probably still at the level of old friends. In this case, Teacher Chris still has a long way to go. Under the company of AI Lizi and Chris, the young man rarely experienced the warmth of a family. After a warm dinner, Chris found an opportunity to give AI Lizi a look and got up to leave. So only Luoya and AI Lizi were left in the room. However, it had to be said that Luoya really needed to read some books recently to stabilize his extraordinary power. After all, after the last historical fragment, his strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, and he was close to the limit of source rank 4. However, this kind of leap in progress had an unstable foundation, and an inappropriate consolidation was likely to cause problems. In order to achieve this goal, Luoya needed a lot of historical records to enrich himself. If he was in the Akot family, it might be a little difficult, but fortunately, he was in St. Freya Academy, and he really couldn't finish reading the resources in the library in a short time. No matter if it was a history book from hundreds of years ago or a scroll from thousands of years ago, no matter if it was a strange story or a serious history, as long as Luoya was by her side, AI Lizi didn't care. After all, rather than saying that she was reading a book, it was better to say that she was reading a person. Beside the sofa where the lamp was lit, Luoya and the silver-haired girl were sitting side by side. The boy was holding a thick book and slowly flipping through it, while the girl was silently rubbing against his shoulder like a cat. This familiar feeling made Luoya's heart relax. He felt as if he was in the mansion of Akot Hill. Really, this aspect hasn't changed at all. Since he was a child, Luoya had discovered this characteristic of AI Lizi. If the girl was divided into liberal arts and science, AI Lizi was undoubtedly an all-rounder talent. Subjects like mathematics that gave many girls headaches were not difficult at all in AI Lizi's eyes. Liberal arts and the like were also a piece of cake for her. She was a standard top student. Under this long-term tacit understanding, Luoya and AI Lizi didn't discuss anything and just snuggled up to each other for a few hours. When it was close to midnight, a strange spell began to come from afar. Juliana felt that she was going to starve to death. As a student of St. Freya Academy, the so-called hunger naturally didn't refer to the hunger of ordinary people due to lack of food, but in fact, it was the cost of using the spell on her body. The Blood Tribe was a famous race in Xiya's ancient times. But compared to other mythical creatures, the Blood Tribe's origin was noble, but their body wasn't that different from humans. Therefore, they could reproduce with humans through ordinary reproduction. Chapter 393. That night, due to the unexpected arrival of the girl, Ai Lizzie did not make any excessive requests to Luoya. Instead, she chased her away and went to sleep. That's right. For the current Luoya, sleeping in separate beds was already within her expectations. Fortunately, nothing unexpected happened throughout the night. When she woke up the next morning and felt the girl lying on her chest, Luoya even felt a trace of familiarity. Is it because I haven't seen Ai Lizzie for half a year? After the elimination of Selena, the Challengers Cup competition entered its most heated stage. The strongest contestants began their final battle, and St. Freya Academy inevitably began its internal strife. Even the transfer students from the Kingdom of Knights had to face off against their own people one by one. After that, Luoya still did not leave. Instead, she continued to watch the competition and quickly confirmed her next opponent, Gelt. After Gelt transformed into his giant form, he blasted all the trees into the sky with a heavy punch. Juliana completely lost the shadow that she relied on to move. She could only helplessly meet force with force, and naturally, she was defeated by Gelt's iron fist. And Gelt. In the midst of the thunderous cheers, the tall man waved his hand, and then turned his gaze to Luoya, who was in the audience seat of the Blue Rose Academy. The two of them looked at each other, their eyes cold and filled with battle intent. Will the versatile summoner Luoya emerge victorious? Or will the ancient bloodline giant Gelt continue his glory? The hottest competition of the Challengers Cup. Everyone, please place your bets. Time slowly passed in the midst of the burning fighting spirit of the two sides until the day of the competition. After a few days of rest, in the Leinster Battle Arena, the competition that had been hyped by various merchants for nearly a week finally began. As the two sides of the battle, the two of them did not communicate because they understood each other's stubbornness. Words alone would not be able to resolve the dispute between the two of them. Luoya even felt that words might be more effective against these giant bloodline users. The ninth field, Ash Desert. The Ash Desert was a terrain just like the literal meaning of its name. In the whole secret realm, there were only flying ashes similar to ashes after being burned and the sand of the desert terrain. There was no cover at all to hide. In this place, the two sides could only pursue and fight head-on. Under the expectant gaze of the audience, Luoya and Gelt entered the arena. After the baptism of dust and sand, the two figures appeared separately in the open desert, separated by thousands of meters. Gelt's bloodline came from the giants, but his origin substance wasn't the common power of the giants. Instead, it was trace. And just as the name implied, the Gust race's supernatural strength was, to a certain extent, traced back to the origin of their bloodline, which was the history of the giants. In order to gain more power, the Gust race had spent a lot of effort in researching this aspect, and the Gulen Daer was one of the discoveries they made during their research. On both sides of the desert, Luoya and Gelt didn't talk nonsense as they immediately unleashed their full strength. Chapter 394. After finishing his battle with Gelt, Luoya's mood improved a lot after hearing Gelt's last words. The anger that was caused by the Gulen Daer being discredited had mostly dissipated. What? Princess Nua Ayer wants to forfeit? Forfeit? Nua Ayer? Although the importance of the Challengers Cup to princesses like Nua Ayer and Xia Luot was much lower than others, the publicity effect was unparalleled. Moreover, it was already the semi-finals stage. How could they forfeit? Luoya was puzzled and asked his own question. He didn't expect the female student to be troubled after hearing his question. What? Well, you guys can leave. In the classical and elegant living room, a blonde girl sat alone at the tea table by the balcony. She dismissed the aristocrats in the room and smiled at the approaching youth. Well, I beat up that arrogant guy. But that's not important. I heard that you want to forfeit. What's the matter? Angels were the embodiment of holiness in ancient times. Nua Ayer, who possessed the blood of an angel, shouldn't have any abnormalities. Once there was a problem, it would be a big problem. Nua Ayer, what's the matter? Nostalgia. Nua Ayer's face revealed a smile as she recalled the similar historical situation she experienced with the youth. Luoya was surprised when he heard this. He stared at the girl and asked, "Well, the blood is restless. Maybe it's about to advance to gold." Hearing Nua's answer, Luoya couldn't help but widen his eyes. A strange feeling suddenly welled up in his heart. The youth's heart was filled with doubts. Not only did his worries not lessen, but it began to increase instead. Because the advancement of the blood was different from the extraordinary level, it may cause the body to be unable to bear it. In fact, Nua's condition when she was younger was because she was too young when she advanced. Now that she was advancing to gold, would the situation be more serious? Chapter 395. Although the exchange with Nu'a was heartwarming, the recent series of events around him made Luoya feel slightly uneasy. However, it had to be said that the doubts in the young man's heart were not supported by any actual situation, and seemed to be groundless fears. Soon after, Nua's decision was made public by the tournament organizers. The Challengers Cup was not just a material reward. The winner would also receive great fame. This kind of fame transcended national boundaries, and had a huge impact on a person's future. Fortunately, the people of the theocracy still had a hope, and that was Luoya of the Akat family. After becoming the only contestant from his country, the young man gained a large number of supporters out of thin air. Nua's incident had a great impact on the tournament, but no one expected that the incident would be overshadowed by an even more explosive piece of news just one day later. Edward of the Grey Rose, who was one of the favorites to win the tournament and ranked second among the seeded contestants, was defeated by Williams. The Heart Sword was unleashed by Williams for the first time in this match. Its effect was shocking, especially the final scene where the blade flew like a meteor and broke through Edward's heavy defense to cut him in half. This caused the audience to cheer. The second level 3 source level contestant in this year's Challengers Cup. Such news almost instantly caused an uproar in the entire tournament, because this was the first time there were 2 level 3 source level contestants in the same tournament since the Challengers Cup was held. Under such an atmosphere, phrases such as Genius Knight began to appear one after another. Williams' name caused a great uproar, and his popularity soared like a rocket. He became the favorite to win the tournament. Xia Luo's golden soul could attack and defend freely, but in the face of overwhelming numbers, it did not have enough destructive power. Although Xia Luo's gem curse could make up for this, it was obviously inferior to Lilian's summoning speed. Perhaps due to the relationship between the two countries, Luoya could see that Lilian did not go all out in this battle. Instead, she used a battle of attrition to achieve victory. However, after this last match, the top 4 contestants of the Challengers Cup were officially decided. These 4 extraordinaires were about to compete for the honor of being at the top of the younger generation. But in Roja's eyes, this was especially strange because from his point of view, this was a match between siblings. Thus, under the gazes of everyone in the arena, the 4 of them began to draw lots for their fates. However, the results left the audience both happy and worried. Group 1, Group 2. When such a result appeared on the screen, the battle arena was in an uproar. The audience of Saint Maester cheered in surprise, cheering for Luoya's luck. The audience of the theocracy was excited, as were the members of the Blue Rose faction and the supporters of Luoya. On the other side, the fans and students of the Austin Empire, as well as the audience who supported Williams, were somewhat worried. After all, no matter how they looked at it, the opponent who was also at the 3rd level of the source rank was a strong opponent. Before the final match, Lilian naturally did not want to fight with Luoya. On the other hand, the match with Lilian was exactly what Williams wanted. After all, she participated in the Challengers Cup to prove that she was stronger than the people around Luoya. The moment she passed by Luoya before leaving the arena, Lilian said so to him in an imperceptible voice. The young man smiled. After drawing lots to determine the number of matches, the 4 final contestants left the arena respectively. The battle arena was sent off with cheers and applause. Everyone knew that no matter who won or lost, they would definitely become the leaders of the younger generation. I'll be leaving first. Remember to bring the trophy with you when you come back. Chapter 396. Under the dim light of the butterfly dance pavilion, the reddish-brown-haired girl's emerald eyes narrowed slightly, and a blush appeared on her delicate face. She stretched out her slender white hand and gently placed it on the boy's chest. Her fingers intertwined as she measured Luoya's chest. Is it itchy? Looking at the young lady who mistakenly thought that her actions had tickled the boy, Luoya turned his head and denied. Xia Luo raised her eyes and stared at the boy in front of her for a while. Suddenly, she narrowed her eyes as if she had understood something. Not only did she not retreat, she instead took a step forward. With a teasing smile on her face, the reddish-brown-haired girl once again stretched out her hand and pointed at the boy's chest. Inch by inch, she began to measure his chest, but this time, the young lady was no longer focused on measuring. Instead, she seemed to unintentionally lean on the boy's body. "What's wrong, dear?" The boy, who didn't know what to say, was silent for a moment. He could only turn his face away again, but he didn't expect Xia Luo's warm breath to suddenly hit his neck again. The boy, who was complaining in his heart, resisted the throbbing in his heart. On the other side, the reddish-brown-haired young lady was getting more and more excited. She observed Luoya's increasingly red cheeks and resisted the urge to laugh. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for this heart-stirring prank to be discovered. "Xia Luo, is this the way to measure your chest?" Looking at the young lady, who was smiling in all seriousness, Luoya nodded with conviction and then said. The black-haired boy took a step forward and hooked Xia Luo's slender waist. Before the reddish-brown-haired girl could react, he approached her and began to breathe into the girl's small ear. The effect was extremely obvious. The girl, who was suddenly attacked, let out a short scream, but Luoya didn't stop. After enduring for a moment, Xia Luo had no choice but to open her mouth and beg for mercy. I was wrong, dear, please forgive me." The reddish-brown-haired girl who was attacked cried out in alarm. However, the boy, who was teased for a long time, didn't buy it. Under this playfulness, Xia Luo's body became more and more limp, her cheeks flushed, and her breathing quickened until a sudden sound was heard. "Lord Xia Luo, what happened?" "Okay." After a bit of fooling around, Luoya's disappointment of losing the competition was much better. Seeing the young lady's happy face, Luoya's eyes, and then she reluctantly said goodbye to Luoya. Chapter 397. After the duel with Teresa, Luoya went off the stage to check his body according to the competition procedure. Another fierce battle began in the arena. But what the young man didn't expect was that when he returned to the stage after finishing all the checks, the arena was already in an uproar. Venue number 30. As a battle of spells, although the Challengers Cup added various secret realms in order to enrich the types of venues, the most basic arena still existed, which was this arena number 30. But one had to admit that even though the arena in the Leinster Battle Arena was relatively spacious compared to other places, it was still too small for the two of them right now. Although there would be spell protection around the arena, due to the spectators, in order to avoid major accidents, the rules stipulated that anyone who stepped out of the arena would be judged as the loser. Besides, Lillian wasn't the only one who stepped out of the arena, but her summoned creatures as well. The noisy shouting in the arena continued, and there was obviously a fierce debate on the side of the tournament organizer. The higher-ups of the Austin Empire strongly requested for a new venue for the sake of Her Royal Highness, which led to the match not starting yet. But after a long discussion, the tournament officials decided to uphold the original result of the draw. 1 second, remember. Antonio was at the top of the Extraordinaries, the long-established speaker of the Country of Scholars, and the headmaster of St. Freya Academy. His position in Xia was extremely high, and no one dared to challenge him, especially when his actions were completely in line with the rules of the tournament. In the arena, Lillian's Magician Legion was basically crippled, and the knights didn't have enough distance to charge, so the combat troops she chose to use were a small-scale, high-quality combination. William's tactic was even simpler, and that was to force Lillian to step out of the arena. In the arena, Williams began to attack without caring about the consumption of his spell power. The surging spell power turned into a tide of light through the skill of the Heart Sword, attacking Lillian endlessly on the opposite side of the arena. The final result was as expected. After the end of the match, The live audience who saw the result of the verdict began to talk about it. There were rare complaints about the competition. After all, in everyone's opinion, this match between three source-grade players should be the most exciting battle in the entire Challengers Cup. But now, it seemed that it wasn't even as satisfying as Luoya's match. Especially the audience from the Austin Empire, many of them were furious. The moment Lillian saw Luoya, she was taken aback and her stern expression softened a little. After informing the staff around her, Her Royal Highness walked over to the young man with an apologetic look on her face. No, this battle has nothing to do with senior sister's strength. It's because of the venue. Hearing Lillian's self-reproach, the young man fell silent. For a moment he didn't know how to comfort the young lady. Really, you really know how to find excuses for me, the black-haired young man said with a smile on his face. Lillian could not help but curl her lips as well. She closed her eyes and let out a long sigh of relief, before turning to the young man and reminding him. All right, I understand. Chapter 398. On the Santa Freya commercial street at night, under the streetlights, the black-haired young man looked at the words in Teresa's notebook, and fell into a daze for a moment. Such words reflected in the young man's eyes made Luoya confused, and at a loss at what to do at the same time. Currently, Xia was not in a large-scale war for the time being, and Luoya was the only son of the Marquis of the Theocracy. Where did this so-called hardship come from? However, your clan, that Teresa mentioned caught Luoya's attention. The Ard clan. To be precise, it's Mr. Luoya's ancestor, Wendy Ard. Suddenly hearing the name of an ancestor that he had never heard of before, the black-haired young man frowned and his gaze became a lot more serious. However, he did not expect Teresa to suddenly change the topic and ask a question that surprised Luoya. I've heard of it. It's an alliance formed by angels, dragons, and highland elves, right? I've seen an ancestor who protected their great creation in a historical fragment before. Why? Is this matter related to the alliance of the three races? The pink-haired girl wrote silently, and told Luoyu a piece of unknown history of the three races in ancient times. In ancient times, as time passed and Xia's environment changed, the mythical races gradually could not adapt to this world. They anxiously searched for a way to continue their bloodline, and finally set their sights on the human race that many prophecies said would become powerful. That was why there were so many alien bloodlines today. However, the prophecies of the alliance of the three races did not stop there. Whether it was the mother goddess or the savior, they had brought great disasters to the supernatural races in ancient times. Therefore, preventing them from reviving had always been one of the major goals of the Twilight Sage Association. Luoya had long been aware of this point, but the young man was not concerned about this point. Luoya frowned deeply as the figures of the two girls appeared in his mind. He took it seriously in his heart, but at the same time, he was a little puzzled because although this prophecy was important, it did not seem to belong to Luoya. That's right. Because at the end of the Second Era, Wendy Ard of the Ard clan once again accurately predicted this prophecy. This is also the reason for William's current situation. At the end of the Second Era, one of the scattered members of the Twilight Sage Association. She was a famous master of astrology and prophecy at that time. Almost all the members in the early days of the Kingdom of Knights were followers who were saved by her. In other words, the Kingdom of Knights was a country established by her knights. Hearing this, the black-haired young man couldn't help but widen his eyes. He finally understood why the Kingdom of Knights treated him so differently. But Wendy Ard and Ard's prophecy, Wendy's prophecy, Xi's but Wendy. Ard's SSSS. SSS. But even when she was dying, Luoya, this great ancestor, was still worried about the future of the people around her. And because of that, she used her unparalleled talent to predict the fate for the last time. The prophecy was the prophecy of the destruction of the three races alliance, and the future of the Ard clan who had always been fighting against them. The prophecy was about the time of the destruction of the three races alliance. Wendy predicted that it would happen 1,000 years later, and that the Ard clan's inheritance would be severed. The bloodline awakened would face great danger. However, The prophecy about the specific situation of the Ard clan was very chaotic. First prophecy. The descendants of the Ard clan will fall into depravity. They are in great danger. Stay away. Third prophecy. The descendants of the Ard clan will die in an academy under the witness of the successors of the three races. Chapter 399. Do you feel guilty about this to me? Normally, the natural awakening of your clan would make the user of the Shadow Warrior armor feel something and take action. But for so many years, Williams didn't feel anything. As for the so-called guilt, Luoya didn't even know where to start. After knowing the series of things about Williams, Luoya, who got a death exemption, didn't feel happy. Instead, he was angry. But he had to admit that he actually understood the Ald clan's approach rationally. Was the Ald clan wrong? From their point of view, they weren't wrong. The users of the armor were obviously voluntary. They must have received great kindness from the Ald clan, and were willing to repay with their lives. The purpose of doing this was only to prevent the sudden death of their clansmen, due to the awakening of their bloodline. Remember, under the street lamp, the black-haired boy opened his eyes. He looked at the girl beside him calmly and said softly, "Why? Williams is very strong. He must be of great help to Mr. Luoya, right?" Facing Luoya's sudden question, the pink-haired girl's pen paused. She blinked and didn't know how to answer for a moment. The black-haired boy saw this and smiled faintly. Looking at the starry sky in the distance, the black-haired boy sighed under Teresa's surprised gaze and said, "The reason is very simple. Because we are warriors who resist fate. We resist the fate of certain death, the fate of the decline of our clan, and the unfortunate fate of our loved ones. We are in a desperate situation, but we will never bow to fate. This is our spirit and also our glory. Because of this, Akkad can survive for thousands of years after its inheritance was cut off." The young man's resolute voice caused the girl beside him to widen her eyes. On the other side, the white-haired witch silently chanted the hero's name as the corner of her lips curled up. The Earth Mother closed her eyes in peace. In the blood-colored plains, the eyes of the gigantic skeleton burst out with radiance. That was the praise from a warrior who was equally as great. Luoya didn't deny the concerns and actions of the ancestors of the Ald clan. However, as the saying went, there were things that a great man should and shouldn't do. Luoya wouldn't back down on some choices. But Williams is very stubborn. I don't think he'll give up on bringing you away. He thinks it's his duty and his goal. I hope that he can choose again, and choose his own goal. That's right. If his purpose is to become a guardian of the past prophecy, then our differences will probably always exist. I will also insist on rejecting him. But if his purpose is to become someone who can travel together with me and fight alongside me, then I will use the way of the country of knights to let him understand that his fate has changed and meaningless sacrifices are no longer necessary. Well then, Miss Teresa, let's call it a night. Thank you for telling me all this. Hearing the words of the pink-haired girl, Luoya nodded slightly and turned around to leave the commercial street. Teresa smiled at the young man's back until Luoya completely disappeared. Then, she turned her gaze to a corner behind her. And under her gaze, the young girl in a cloak and full of armor finally appeared. He should have noticed it too. Your presence is too unique. After several interactions, Teresa actually had the intention to understand Luoya's character. Today's conversation was also based on the premise that Teresa believed that Luoya wouldn't accept William's self-sacrifice. And the reason was simple. As an elder sister, Teresa didn't want her distant relative to have such an ending. Every time she saw Williams in this state, Teresa, who used to play with him when they were young, would feel heartache. Both of them had the bloodline of dragons. She, who was known as the Princess of Curses, lived a luxurious life and was loved by the people. However, a real princess couldn't even wear a dress. How is it, Mina? Are you happy? Didn't I say that he wouldn't leave you alone? The young girl in armor lowered her head, not knowing how to react. Teresa smiled and wrote, "What? Noble and proud, fearless and powerful. Isn't this the spirit that a knight pursues?" Thinking so, the young girl ridiculed the young man's duplicity in her heart. She had to admit that Luoya's performance in the previous battle had trampled on the young girl's points. It was also because of this that Williams hid in a panic and only dared to show himself after leaving. What's left was a true competition of strength. Before such a major competition began, the contestants would deliberately avoid contact. On one hand, it was to prevent being accused of colluding to manipulate the competition. On the other hand, private contact could affect the fighting spirit of both sides, thus affecting the results of the competition. In the eyes of the young man, this was no longer just a competition for the championship of the Challengers Cup. It was also a competition to prove his beliefs and strength. His opponent wasn't just Williams, but also the will left behind by Alfred from 1,000 years ago, which was no longer in line with the times. Due to the controversial nature of the previous match between Williams and Lillian, the reputation of the tournament organizers had taken a hit. Regarding this, the tournament planners had to actively deal with public relations, and the method was to divert the attention of the public to the next match. Although the battle between Luoya and Williams wasn't as eye-catching as the battle of the century, or the clash of the two strongest geniuses due to the difference in their strength, it was fortunate that Luoya's performance throughout the competition was outstanding. Many spectators in the Austin Empire believed that Lillian's match was rigged. A considerable number of them were antagonistic towards Williams, so they hoped that Luoya would win. But it must be said that these spectators in the Austin Empire weren't Luoya's supporters. To be precise, they supported anyone who wasn't Williams to become the champion. This year's Challengers Cup was the only one where the age of participants was lowered. But after the cruel elimination, the two contestants who made it to the finals were both first-year students. This became the biggest explosive point of the competition. The meaning of the words golden generation could be said to be quite significant. In history, those who were crowned with this title were the heroes of the generation who led the race through the crisis when mankind was facing a crisis. In the current situation where the alien race was in danger, this word represented the future of mankind. The promotion of the championship title made the entire competition even more important. The news media, the people of Leinster, the spectators from all over the world, and even the official teams of each country were a little restless. They began to stand on the side to create momentum for the contestants they favored. Under the notice of the casino and in front of the bar counter in the tavern, all kinds of disputes continued. In the Leinster Battle Arena, more than 100 contestants who passed the preliminary round had gathered again. They were waiting in the spectator seats to see who would become the champion of the younger generation. In the commentator seats, the officials of the theocracy and the country of knights were also nervous. Of course, they hoped that their countries would obtain the final honor. At the highest point, Antonio's face was calm and the corners of his mouth were curled up in a smile. Under everyone's expectant gaze, the opening music played and the final curtain slowly opened. Chapter 400. Leinster, the capital of the Kingdom of Scholars, was now deserted. Amidst the majestic music, the Leinster Coliseum welcomed the main characters of the building with the highest level of etiquette. For carriages specially prepared to welcome the contestants drove into the arena, and the audience cheered in unison. In the Rose faction, Paul and Gerlach led their members to cheer loudly for Luoya who entered the arena. Next door, Sia Luot, who was surrounded by the nobles of Rochet, did not perform divination today. Instead, she chose to witness everything with her eyes. With the vast terrain, Lillian's army spread out smoothly, while Teresa used spells to shift to the air to fight. The battle of attrition between the two sides was quite intense. In the end, Lillian secured victory with the great spell of the Magician Legion. Under the watchful eyes of the audience, the black-haired young man and the knight in heavy armor finally entered the arena. At the same time, the cheers of the supporters of both sides rang out. The overly loud sound once overwhelmed the voice of the tournament organizers, forcing the tournament host to wave his hand to calm the crowd. Don't worry, give it your all. This is a once-in-a-lifetime match. No matter what, we shouldn't leave any regrets here. To hold back in this final match was not only disrespectful to the audience, but also to the other contestants who had fought in the tournament. Williams seemed to agree with this point. Well, then let's decide with victory or defeat, whether it's your fate or mine. Due to the fierce battle of the Challengers Cup, the contestants with powerful curses often suffered excessive injuries. The tournament organizers generally increased the substitute curse beasts for both sides in the final to ensure safety. Therefore, in this game, the substitute curse beasts for Roja and Williams increased from 5 to 10. Antonio, who was wearing a robe, glanced at the two below and smiled. Then he held up the crystal ball and spoke under the nervous gaze of the audience. As soon as he finished speaking, the scene in the crystal ball constantly changed and finally stopped on a crimson land. Oh! Scorched mountain range. The climate was hot, the land was crimson, and there was almost no vegetation. Therefore, it could be said that there was no decent hiding place. To some extent, the situation was somewhat similar to the battle against Gelt. There was basically no opportunity to ambush the enemy. Therefore, there was only one tactic left to be used, a head-on confrontation. Fighting spirit burned silently in the hearts of the boy and girl. The responsibility that had been instilled in them for many years conflicted with the personal desire in the bottom of their hearts, making Williams long for Luoya to give her an answer. The black-haired boy had long since made up his mind to break Williams' shackles with his own hands. The dregs of the old era should be removed, and the people who were bound should be liberated. And the beginning of all of this was this moment, this very moment. Sword intent. This was something that Luoya had never felt before. But now it was really displayed in front of him, making him feel an enormous pressure. Under this pressure, his body began to produce hallucinations. Luoya had a vague premonition that William's heart sword was about to reach its peak. Chapter 401. Trump cards were the most important factor in a supernatural being's battle. This was because it was generally difficult to determine the outcome of a battle using ordinary spells. Only unexpected abilities or battle tactics would be able to deal a decisive blow. Although this statement was too absolute, it showed how important trump cards were to extraordinaries. And powerful extraordinaries such as Xia usually had 2 trump cards. Different source substances often led to a decisive difference in the way extraordinaries obtained their power. This difference was more inclined towards growth. Most of the time, it did not affect the battle as much as imagined. The thing that really affected the battle the most was the bloodline. Among William's trump cards, one was the heart sword that he had tempered with his willpower for many years, the other was courage, one of the 3 most suitable origin substances for battle, and the last was the giant dragon bloodline that he had inherited from ancient times. In front of him, Petra's curse flame stream had turned into a raging fire, and a burning heat wave swept across the already scorching land. However, in the center of the flames, William's curse reaction not only did not decrease, but also expanded like never before. Amidst the burning lava from the earth's core, a pair of golden eyes lit up under the blazing flames. At the moment it opened its eyes, a pressure that belonged to ancient mythical creatures came from afar, as if it could topple the mountains and overturn the seas. It spread out its wings, and the scorching lava was easily split apart like it was a toy, completely exposing its majestic body to everyone's eyes. The judges of the tournament were speechless as they watched the video. The department in charge of the arcane realm was very nervous. The rising spell reaction was as awe-inspiring as the majestic appearance of the giant creature, but it also made the arcane realm very uneasy. In the scorched mountain range, Luoya looked into the distance with a serious face. As the only person who faced the dragon's pressure head-on, he knew better than anyone else how terrifying Williams was. Atavistic bloodline. This was the truth behind Williams' incomprehensible power. The giant dragon constructed with this powerful bloodline ability was almost the same as a real giant dragon. Thousands of meters away, the dragon and the black-haired young man looked at each other. Both sides knew that they could no longer fight a war of attrition. A strange silence fell. Neither Williams nor Luoya acted rashly, but the spell power in the arcane realm began to gather around them. The audience in the arena returned to their seats after the commotion, nervously waiting for the two to make their next move. Time went by, but the situation on the battlefield did not change much except that Luoya removed Peitila's appearance. The dragon and the giant faced each other from afar. The atmosphere became more and more tense as time passed. Roar! The black-haired youth raised his head under the all-destroying dragon flames. His golden eyes lit up as if they were burning. His voice was calm as he recited his final trump card, which also changed the world. Under the impact of the curse, the origin substance of the crown trembled violently, and the crown stone exploded with a dazzling light. The figure of an ancient, destructive civilization flashed behind the young man, as if it had reappeared in the world. The moment he spoke, the scorched earth seemed to have been extinguished, and the sky began to change color. An explosive cold air rushed into the sky, freezing everything. Boom! The two completely different types of destruction consumed each other. A vortex of spell power was born between heaven and earth. The battle between the two of them was far beyond the level of an ordinary source grade 3. The entire arcane realm shook violently. The staff outside the arena panicked. The monitoring department was also in a mess. However, at the highest point of the arena, the white-haired old man who was watching the video did not stop the battle. Chapter 402. Williams had a dream. At that time, the girl didn't have powerful supernatural abilities. She wore a white dress and played with Sister Teresa on the grass. She was as lively and free as most children of her age. They walked through the garden and played in the palace. Heavy and ugly, the girl didn't want to wear such things, but for the prophecy 1,000 years ago, for the mission of her family, she still reached out her hand. "What are you going to do?" Hearing the question in her ear, the girl looked at the black-haired and golden-eyed child who appeared out of nowhere. After thinking for a moment, she answered, "No, that kind of thing, I don't need it." Everything nearby gradually glowed in her footsteps and finally disappeared. "Are you awake?" In the final confrontation, Williams's heart sword and Luo Ye's frozen earth power conflicted. Under the two different forces, neither side had any means of defense. The only choice was to attack with all their might. Both of them knew that whoever smashed all the others' substitute curse vessels first would win the final victory. The long sword in the armored knight's hand cut deeply into the boy's shoulder, and the blood splattered on his cheek. On the other side, Luo Ye's hand touched Williams's armor and completely froze it. However, even if both sides had caused excessive damage to each other, Williams knew that she had lost. At the last moment when the sword cut into her body, Luo Ye endured great pain and froze her blood. Williams's full blow was sealed at this point. The frost froze the girl's body along the sword and Luo Ye's palm. Williams didn't regain her consciousness until the boy retracted it. The outcome was settled. Looking at the pale boy, Williams had a complicated thought. She didn't know why she wasn't annoyed, but she felt a little relieved. On the viewing platform, the officials of Pender were dumbfounded. Antonio smiled and didn't say anything. And in the corner, the pink-haired girl was excitedly wiping the corners of her eyes. She knew that the moment his identity was exposed, William's fate had already changed. Looking at the girl's heroic and delicate face at this moment, Luo Ye's golden eyes widened slightly, then she smiled helplessly. "What is it? Gender is not important to me. My goal is to complete my mission. But when it comes to stubbornness, you are the one. You should cherish yourself more." That's true. Name? No matter how I think about it, the name Williams is fake. What's your real name? Wilhelmina. Well then, Wilhelmina Coburnat, as the victor of the duel and the successor of the Auld family, I solemnly inform you that the task of the vow is over. You don't need to sacrifice anymore. You can take off your heavy armor, and you don't need to hide your true face anymore. Your fate is no longer dependent on me, and everything doesn't have to go according to plan. You are free. From now on, your life will belong to you. Hearing Luo Ye's calm words, the young girl's eyes slowly widened. Thousands of emotions surged into her heart in an instant. She wanted to say something, but she didn't know what to say. What if? I don't want to change anything. I see. The girl who listened to his suggestion smiled. In the next moment, the two figures disappeared in the light and returned to the familiar battle arena. Chapter 403. In the dazzling light, the black-haired boy and the armored girl returned to Leinster's arena. Both of their substitute curse vessels were damaged. They were exhausted and scarred. However, what they didn't expect was that they were greeted with deafening applause and cheers that had never been seen in the arena before. Whether it was Luoya's use of ancient mystic arts to forcibly break the level limit, William's bloodline materialization, or the battle between the giant dragon and the giant, everything was too shocking. In the end, Williams exposed his true form, which brought a hint of romance to the battle, making countless girls in the audience excited. After the mythical battle, the final winner was not Williams, who was source level 3, but Luoya, who was source level 4. This result was also unprecedented. Before this, there had never been a source level 4 victory over source level 3 in the Challenger Cup. If this battle was an exciting war blockbuster in the eyes of ordinary people, then in the eyes of these professionals, it was a popular science video. No matter who it was, even the powerful Antonio would gain something in such a battle. In the arena, Luoya slowly retracted the frozen earth, and Williams also let go of the sword hilt. Then the medical staff of the competition swarmed up and performed emergency treatment on the two. It's not even a fatal wound. There's nothing to be afraid of. Instead, it's the side effect. I hope it doesn't come too soon. The championship is not over after the battle. I have to receive the award later. Quick! Stop the bleeding. At the request of the medical staff, Luoya, who wanted to leave the arena by himself, could only lie down and be sent away. Until Luoya and Williams left the arena, the cheers in the arena finally subsided slowly. After the final between Luoya and Williams ended, the arena entered a short preparation time. Various shows were performed in the arena for the audience to pass the time. After nearly an hour of waiting, the Challenger Cup finally entered the awarding stage. This was also the reason why more than 100 contestants were invited today. Amidst this respectful and courteous reception, the thick and heavy doors of the battle arena opened once again. The crimson-red carpet flowed like a river towards the towering rostrum. The ceremonial soldiers armed to the teeth entered in 2 rows, standing on both sides of the carpet to form a corridor. When the girl appeared, there were enthusiastic cheers and applause in the arena. In the face of so many supportive audience, Williams also waved his hand, which set off another climax in the arena. After that, Teresa, Xiaoluot, and the others entered the arena one by one. The tall Gelt, the mysterious and elegant Juliana, the steady gray Rose Edward, and the highly popular top 8 contestants led more than 100 contestants into the arena. Many of the spectators, especially the Leinster locals, had watched the Challengers Cup more than once. With a lot of experience, they knew that this year's Challengers Cup was far more exciting than the previous years. The biggest difference was the participation of the younger generation of the country of knights, which brought too many surprises to the spectators of various countries. In the cheers of the Golden Year, more than 100 contestants came to the official viewing platform. The representatives of the schools and the higher-ups of the academies came one by one with different badges in their hands and handed over the medals that represented honor to the contestants. At this time, Luoya was dressed in formal attire. After a round of emergency treatment, the wounds on the young man's body had healed, but the lost blood and spell power could not be replenished immediately. Antonio looked at Luoya, who still looked a little pale. He stretched out his hand and cast a few spells. Under the light, the young man looked a little better. The smiling dean also began his speech to the audience. Chapter 404. On the hospital bed, the black-haired teenager was slightly stunned when he heard the system prompt. He didn't expect that at the last moment, when the blessing of the goddess of fate was about to expire, it would actually work again. Ding! At the celebration banquet, silently stare at Williams for more than 15 seconds at a time when the other party is aware of it. Looking at the new suggestion, the black-haired teenager's expression became strange. Although according to past experience, Luoya would follow the suggestion, he had to admit that the suggestion this time was a little impolite. It was fine if it was a guy, but a girl? No. Staring for 15 seconds, a guy seemed to be even worse. The goddess of fate's suggestion was originally set to save Estrella. Although the teenager had encountered many accidents along the way, he basically got good results under her suggestion, and steadily moved toward his goal. After winning the Challengers Cup, Luoya felt that it was time to end it. It was not uncommon for St. Freya Academy to hold a celebration after winning the Challengers Cup. It was even a tradition of the academy, so the relevant preparations had been made long ago. After 3 days of waiting, the students in the academy could not wait any longer. Before evening, the carriage specially prepared by the academy was waiting outside the Blue Hall. After dressing up, Luoya, who was wearing a formal dress, finally put down his trophy and went to the banquet venue accompanied by Paul and Gerlach. Looking at the students shouting and waving on both sides of the road, Luoya couldn't help but smile bitterly. At the same time, he felt the strong influence of the title of Challengers Cup champion among the young people. In this game, thousands of spectators became his supporters. The title of Challengers Cup champion and honorary baron of the 5 countries was brought to Shia with the officials and spectators of various countries returning home. The battle between him and Williams would become a classic in the hearts of tens of thousands of people, and a topic of conversation in the future, further spreading his name. Winning the Challengers Cup champion would bring great prestige. This was already known to the world. This kind of prestige was not determined by unchangeable things such as birth, but by hard work and hard work. Therefore, it was recognized by people. However, it had to be said that this year, Luoya's popularity was even higher than the previous winners. It even exceeded his own expectations, especially in the Saint Maester theocracy. His reputation was like the sun in the sky. The black-haired boy thought helplessly. Then, he couldn't help but think of the task that Miss Angel had given him before she left. Now that he had successfully obtained the trophy, Luoya's task could be considered completed. All that was left was to pray that Nuwa Iyer would proceed smoothly. The event had yet to officially begin, but the banquet hall was already bustling with noise and excitement. The contestants from St. Freya's Academy arrived one by one, and there was no lack of seated contestants among them. Luoya's arrival was very sudden. It was like throwing a stone into a calm lake, stirring up waves. After the nobles of the theocracy rushed over, Xia Luo was the first to come over and show concern for Luoya's health. The boy responded seriously, and the young lady, who had been worried for the past few days, finally felt relieved. Perhaps it was because of Lillian's lead, or perhaps it was because the Challengers Cup champion title had changed Greenrose Green's view of Luoya. This time, the second-year ring-bearer chatted with Luoya for a while, but their conversation was still a little stiff. On the other hand, Grey Rose Edwards' communication skills were much better. Well, now that the border is actively preparing for war, the benefits of the soldiers in various countries are increasing. There are too many graduates from Leinster, and the competition is too fierce, so the benefits are decreasing. Although Leinster's extraordinaires had a lot of research results, they were still in the rear. Compared to the front lines, it was naturally safer and more comfortable. Under such circumstances, if the benefits were still higher than the front lines, the number of high-ranking extraordinaires on the front lines would definitely decrease. Chapter 405. For Teresa, events such as banquets were troublesome. Therefore, when she was in Pender, Teresa always had a special spokesperson by her side who could read her words in real time. But in St. Freya Academy, where only the students themselves were allowed to enter, the pink-haired girl had a hard time communicating with others, especially when the person she was communicating with was a highly sought-after character. Looking at the notebook in front of him, the black-haired boy was stunned for a moment, then looked down at the girl who grabbed the hem of his shirt. After understanding the girl's difficulties, Luoya waved his hand to reject Paul and the others who were calling for him, then brought the pink-haired girl to sit at a table so that Teresa could write. Mr. Luoya, thank you for helping Williams. Maybe that is true, but it is also a fact that your help changed Williams' fate, so please accept my thanks as her sister. The black-haired boy turned his head to look at the knight who was surrounded by fans in the distance and sighed. The pink-haired girl could not help but blush. Teresa waved her hand to express her denial, then wrote with some guilt. Is there a problem with that? Using her? This understanding is too strict. In my opinion, it is the opposite. Miss Teresa trusts my character, so she told me everything. Isn't that the case? Hearing Luoya's question, The pink-haired girl widened her eyes slightly. She thought for a moment, then nodded with a blush on her cheeks. Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Luoya. What should I do? About this, I'm afraid that Mr. Luoya will have to ask her personally. The students who were originally running around in a mess stopped talking and greeted Antonio, who was dressed up. Teacher Chris also looked radiant today. A group of teachers entered the banquet hall and walked to the end of the hall and to Luoya's side amidst applause. Fortunately, I did not disappoint you. After all, there are not many opportunities to surprise the dean. Antonio's face was full of smiles as he sighed in admiration of the younger generation. Then, he solemnly announced the official start of St. Freya's celebration. At the same time, hundreds and thousands of cursed fireworks rose into the sky, and grand music played at the same time. From the banquet hall to the square outside, the excited students cheered continuously. The celebration was in the form of a meal. The food was provided by St. Freya Academy, and the drinks were paid for by Leinster City Hall. Under such circumstances, eating and drinking was inevitable, or rather, most of the celebrations in Shia were like this. Chapter 406. Under the moonlight, Luoya looked at the smiling girl in front of him. He thought for a while and called out her name softly. Yes, it's me. I don't really care about names, but if there's anything that needs to be changed, I think it's a good idea to start with this name. But even so, it's impossible to make everyone change their names all of a sudden. After all, it's been so many years. I want to start with those close to me. Luoya said and bowed to Wilhelmina. The girl looked away embarrassedly. The young man smiled and thought for a while before asking a serious question. No, we plan to stay here. I say, do you not welcome us? The black-haired young man waved his hand and explained. After hearing Wilhelmina's answer, he felt a lot more relaxed. No matter what the reason was, it was a fact that Wilhelmina had endured torturous training for him. It was also a fact that she was willing to sacrifice herself for him. Although it was all arranged by the ancestors of the Auld family, Luoya, the beneficiary, couldn't be indifferent. As for Brittany, he had an agreement with her. She had a close relationship with his subordinate, Gerlach, and would probably join the consulting department in the future. He didn't have much contact with Stuart, but Luoya had a few words with him. At least their communication was friendly. Of course, there was a more important reason. Luoya felt that the country of knights was too isolated. The descendants of the Twilight Sage Association were rare talents. They had the potential to become the strongest in Shia. No matter if it was fame or resources, they deserved more. The Golden Generation? Indeed, reputation is important to knights. But the main reason why we're staying here is because of you. Of course. After all, the third prophecy exists. Although you said that it's no longer effective and you don't want to leave, we're still worried about leaving you here alone. It's not just me. The 7 of us made this decision together. After hearing this, Luoya blinked in surprise. Suddenly, he felt warmth in his heart. On the other hand, the girl hesitated for a long time and brought up the old topic again. Yes, I can. Are you not welcoming me with this reaction? Speaking of which, isn't this similar to how I was before? No, I'm just a little surprised. Speaking of which, why did you suddenly join? Yeah, I agree with that. Luoya's prophecy was naturally not the 3 prophecies about himself, but the prophecy of Wendy Ald's prophecy about the alliance of the 3 races 1,000 years ago, which was the so-called prophecy of destruction. Wilhelmina's 3rd prophecy about Luoya had failed, so she was a little optimistic about the prophecies of her ancestors. But Luoya, who knew the truth, did not dare to let his guard down. Strictly speaking, all 3 prophecies were correct. Luoya personally felt that the possibility was not high. Difficulties existed, but they were definitely not a dead end. This was the experience that Luoya had summed up after many years of struggle. But it had to be said that this time, the difficulty was a little big. Perhaps they would need more strength and more preparation to overcome it. For this reason, Luoya wanted to propose some suggestions. Min, what is Min Na? Don't randomly call other people by their names. No, it's not that I dislike it, it's just that I'm not used to it. Speaking of which, who are the other people you're talking about? It's Nua Iyer and the others. I want them to join as well. After hearing Luoya's suggestion, Wilhelmina fell into a rare silence. Obviously, she was a little conflicted about the girls around Luoya. Seeing this, she said, no matter if it's the theocracy or Rose, they are all big countries under Xia. They shouldn't drag down the Knight's country. Instead, they should be able to complement each other. Of course, I understand your worries. They might not believe in a prophecy without any evidence. But fortunately, I have some influence in the theocracy and Rose. Under Luoya's persuasion, the girl finally relented a little. She looked at the young man with a serious expression and said, well, I understand that. The others may not be able to do it, but I think they can. The four of them had no problem in terms of stance or willingness, so Luoya could ask the girls to join without hesitation. However, Luoya didn't want to involve the others who were close to Luoya. As the protagonists' team in the original work, Luoya estimated that they wouldn't be able to escape in the future. Everyone was doing this for the future of mankind, and the final outcome was likely to be the same, so he wasn't in a hurry. Saving Estrid was Luoya's initial goal. According to Antonio, the Knight's country didn't agree with his research on Dream of Chaos, fearing that it would lead to the awakening of the Savior. However, Luoya, who had contact with Estrid in that era, knew that the two had nothing to do with each other. He had to save Estrid, but he was afraid that he would have to wait until Wilhelmina, Luoya, and the others had more say. And the right to speak was linked to strength, so in the end, he still had to have real ability. Luoya returned to the banquet hall first, while Wilhelmina went to put on her armor again. At this time, after Antonio and the other teaching staff left the hall, the originally reserved students started to have fun. The extraordinaries had a high degree of body mutation and had a strong endurance, so most of them were good at drinking. As the protagonist, Luoya was naturally dragged into the party. It was understandable that the Knight's country had its customs, not to mention that as a member of the royal family, it was even more admirable to take the lead in following the chivalry and principles. With this reason, the firepower of the girls was greatly reduced, leaving only Luoya to charge. More than an hour later, Luoya finally finished dealing with all the excited students. The young man spent the rest of the time chatting with Xia Luot and the others until midnight, when the celebration officially ended. After the celebration, St. Freya's Academy entered a 2-day break. The indulgent students were able to adjust a little so that their normal lives would not be affected by the hangover. After 3 days of revelry, the whole city of Leinster finally exhausted the remaining excitement of the Challengers' Cup and gradually calmed down. As the tourists left, the merchants also entered a rest period after high-intensity work. The whole city seemed to have changed from young people dancing in nightclubs to middle-aged people soaking in goji berries in thermos cups. The biggest reward of the Challengers' Cup champion was naturally the influence brought by the reputation and the noble title of the 5 countries, but the material rewards were also equally rich, such as the commission of municipal taxes during the event. One of the reasons was naturally that with the development of the times, the people of various countries were getting richer. Another reason was the existence of transfer students from the Knight's country, which led to more people coming to watch the competition, especially the nobles from Pender. Of course, the most important thing was that the competition was really exciting. How long had it been since the Challengers' Cup? It had only been a little more than 2 months, including the preparation before and after, and the tax revenue had exceeded the 1,000,000 gold coins mark. This was daylight robbery. Cities were just like people. If one wanted to be rich, there had to be something different. Perhaps it had to follow the tide of history, or it had to have some unique skills. Leinster was a typical city where educational resources were concentrated. It was unique and irreplaceable, and this accumulation began 1,000 years ago. The first school year lasted from the beginning of spring to autumn. The final exams had long ended before the Challengers' Cup began, and after the largest competition of the younger generation came to an end, the students of St. Freya's Academy finally welcomed the first school year break. The winter break and summer break were designed to avoid the coldest and hottest seasons, but the problem was that the students of St. Freya's Academy came from various countries. If it was really a semester system, Many of them would have to go back and forth between home and the academy for half a year. Therefore, St. Freya's Academy's break was from the end of autumn of the first year to the beginning of spring of the second year. This half a year was more suitable for all the students. And at the beginning of the year, the nobles had to do and participate in many activities, such as leading the people in winter and various New Year's parties. Luoya, on the other hand, had other things to do, such as taking advantage of this last time to meet someone he would not be able to see for the next half a year. Lillian Ackerman. Chapter 407. This year's first year at St. Freya Academy was a happy one to some extent, because most of the students had something to brag about when they returned home. This year at St. Freya Academy was a wonderful time that Paul's previous 10 years combined could not compare to. The young man's strength improved by leaps and bounds during this period. He stood out in the Challengers Cup, the biggest stage for young people in Wuxia, and even won the medal of the top 32. Because of this honor, Paul's situation in the Austin Empire would be greatly improved, and the reason why he could get to where he was today, Paul knew very well that it was Luoya's help. And if this was a direct help, then in terms of indirect help, Luoya's influence was even greater. Therefore, at the end of the first year, Paul specially came to Luoya to express his gratitude, which made the black-haired young man feel a lot of emotions for a while. Once upon a time, Paul's existence was a thorn in Luoya's heart, which made him feel uneasy when he was young. But after actual contact, Luoya found that things were not as bad as he thought. Reality was not a game, and the relationship between people was not determined long ago, but could be changed. What you said is indeed the factor of my help, but in the end, I just provided you with a good environment. Whether it's enthusiastically helping your classmates or taking classes and training seriously every day, it's all your own hard work, so Paul, you can be more confident. I understand, Brother Luoya. At St. Freya Academy, it was not easy for Luoya to contact Lillian, even more so for a meeting without a proper reason. But this was nothing to Paul. Under such a disguise, no one would have thought that Paul's real job was actually a spy agent, the kind that arranged for leaders to meet. I didn't expect senior sister to choose to meet here. Isn't it a little too revealing? Don't worry, I've already asked the Magician Legion to set up a barrier around here. The people outside can't see us. You miss it very much, right? Don't you think it's very suitable as the place where we met for the first time, and the last time before the holidays? Luoya nodded as he listened to the girl's words. More than half a year ago, Luoya and Lillian had met here for the first time. They had looked at each other from afar, and were ready to fight. At that time, Luoya was a problematic student in the eyes of Lillian, who was in charge of maintaining order. Luoya was always on guard against this genius of the Aikman family. Thinking about the same thing, the two looked at each other and smiled tacitly. The purple-eyed girl looked at the setting sun, and lifted her hair by her ears as she sighed. Okay. You have to take care of yourself during this time. There shouldn't be any problems in the Austin Empire, right? This time Lillian, who was originally the favorite to win the championship, didn't win the Challengers Cup. The girl also had two good brothers who couldn't wait for her to die. It was impossible for Luoya not to worry about her after being away for so long. Don't worry. I'm not at the point where I need you to worry about me. It's just a small matter. Lucas and Aubrey can't do anything to me. Besides, have you forgotten that there's Paul now? After getting a good ranking, my brothers will probably target him. So, although the pressure on my side seems to be great, it's actually less than in previous years. Luoya blinked in surprise after listening to Lillian's explanation. He didn't expect that the consequence of him helping Paul would be saving the country in a roundabout way. This time, when Paul returned to the country, some political adventurers and guys who liked to bet on both sides would probably find him. In addition, as a male, Paul's danger level in the eyes of his two brothers had risen sharply. He might even become their primary target. With this thought in mind, Luoya looked at Lillian and felt a little relieved. Then, he informed the girl about the progress of Estrad's matter. Lillian, who heard that Wilhelmina was willing to move around the knight's country for this matter, breathed a sigh of relief, and said that she was willing to help if necessary. For a long time, Lillian had a vague feeling that Emperor Lucas might know that she had the king's blood, and had some understanding of the Akot family. It's okay to investigate this, but senior sister must be careful. Emperor Lucas' ban is very strange. There might be a problem. After exhorting each other for a while, Luoya and Lillian reluctantly bid farewell. The young man's final matters in the academy were settled, and the day of his departure was getting closer and closer. After bidding farewell to Lillian, Luoya, who had a long journey, first began to prepare to return to his country. But before that, a certain beautiful teacher had something to discuss with Luoya. Ai Lizi, who was also a member of the Akot family, also came along. Long-distance relationships were difficult. Long-distance relationships were even more difficult when one party had not made a clear statement. It couldn't be helped. Ever since he fell out of love when he was a student and plunged into work, Chris had not been in a relationship for close to 20 years. The old 24K purebred single dog, coupled with the fact that he had become more mature as he got older, he was not as bold as he was when he was young. Ai Lizi, I see that you have a good relationship with Luoya. How do you usually get close to him? Is that so? Then is there any strategy to settle this once and for all? Settle this once and for all? It's better to drug him. Hearing the criminal plan that popped out of the girl's mouth, Chris was dumbfounded. However, Ai Lizi was unusually calm, as if she was talking about a trivial matter that was not worth mentioning. No, but most people would be angry about this kind of thing, right? Looking at the silver-haired girl who calmly talked about the aftermath of the incident, Chris was once again dumbfounded. However, he immediately understood that Ai Lizi's experience was not something that she could learn from. After thinking about it, Chris could only look for the more reliable Luoya. After the young man and Ai Lizi understood the situation, they also started to think about it. As for father, he has never been too close to women. However, the women who looked for him before had some problems as well, so we can't generalize them. Under the black-haired young man's hurried words of comfort, Chris finally calmed down after hearing the bad news. Ai Lizi also came up with a plan by the side, and the final conclusion was to inform Chris in advance after receiving the news of Kadia's return. First, the two of them would meet, and the rest would depend on Chris himself. After discussing Chris's matter, Luoya and Ai Lizi's return trip was finally settled. On the other side, Wilhelmina and Teresa from the country of knights also came to say goodbye. Due to the bloodline connection between the two of them, Wilhelmina and Teresa made a special trip back to the country of knights to visit Luoya before they left. The two of them didn't have too many deep conversations, and they only wished each other a safe trip. Stuart and Brittany were still here. The war goddess was currently keeping an eye on Garak. Garak had been on tenterhooks for a while, but he had suddenly calmed down recently. It was likely that he had found a way to escape. As for Juliana, she was the most troublesome person to deal with. However, because of this incident, the seed of doubt was planted in Luoya's heart. Perhaps Ai Lizi's bloodline was hiding some sort of secret. This possibility was becoming more and more likely, but no matter what, the girl was still the family member that he treasured the most. Akot Domain and Loche Domain were neighbors, and their routes were similar, so there was no problem for them to travel together. The confluence of the Loche Domain's guards also increased their safety. However, the atmosphere between the two domains became much more dangerous. Haha, Miss Ai Lizi, although you don't have the ability to enforce the marriage, have you forgotten that Luoya and I are still engaged? As the engaged party, it's normal for me to ride in the same carriage as Luoya. You, on the other hand, stop using the excuse that you're underage to pester Luoya. How about you go back to where you belong? Looking at the two empty carriages next to him and the girls who were glaring at each other and wanting to kick each other out of the carriage, Luoya felt a headache coming on. Of course, he couldn't bear to scold Ai Lizi, and they were used to riding together. As for Xia Luot, Luoya couldn't say anything about it. Luoya, who didn't want to offend either side, could only try his best to divert their attention. At the same time, he was glad that Nuwa Iyer had gone back in advance. If Her Royal Highness had joined in, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Was she delayed by something? The black-haired boy thought as he looked at the scenery outside the window and fell into deep thought. Chapter 408. It was late autumn, and the temperature in Audiobook Hill began to drop. People who were engaged in agriculture became busy, and the merchants between the cities also stepped up their transportation before winter. The number of carriages and patrolling soldiers gradually increased, but most of them had smiles on their faces. As for the soldiers, Audiobook Hill's financial situation had improved in recent years, and the entire Shia army's salary had improved as a whole. The soldiers who were responsible for maintaining law and order naturally had their salaries increased. Of course, there was another news that spread to Audiobook City with Luoya's return. That was the news that the boy won the Challengers Cup. This news was also explosive. Even in Audiobook Hill, which was far away from the Kingdom of Scholars, many people knew the importance of this award and the honor it represented after hundreds of years of publicity. People were flowing on both sides of the road, and the whole city was decorated with lanterns and streamers. When Luoya, who had just arrived in the city, saw such a scene, the boy thought it was a coincidence that there was a festival. Later, when Anna came to greet him, he finally realized that this was specially prepared to welcome him. You misunderstood, young master. Although this event was prepared by the mansion, the people came spontaneously. Most of the expenses were paid by us. Everyone welcomes your return from the bottom of their hearts. The announcement of the celebration has been released a week in advance, so it did not affect normal business activities, nor did it cause traffic congestion. Moreover, the expansion of the city gate that you left behind before you left has been completed, so the side gate is enough to deal with emergencies. 1 second. Remember, after listening to Anna's explanation, the boy couldn't help but nod. After thinking for a moment, he stood on the carriage and waved to the crowd. The people on both sides saw this and cheered. Looking at the excited response and the smiling people, Luoya's exhaustion from a month of travel was swept away, and his heart was unprecedentedly warm. The black-haired boy arrived at the familiar mansion under the warm welcome of the people. Looking at the door in front of him that was opened by the servants, Luoya felt a lot of emotions. Due to Xia Luo's status as the fiancé, Ai Lizi, who couldn't win against the young lady, had no choice but to retreat strategically and switch from offense to defense. On the other side, it was rare for Xia Luo to not be obstructed by her old enemy Nua Iyer. She also seized the opportunity to attack, and this was reflected in the fact that Luoya's carriage had become the busiest place in the entire convoy, with the two girls repeatedly entering and exiting it. The second half of the journey was pretty good after the girls stopped fighting. Luoya even took out 2 days to go hunting with the two of them. However, the process of hunting made the youth quite speechless. However, when it came to Xia Luo and Ai Lizi, the hunting became a demonstration of their skills. The reddish-brown-haired girl closed her eyes and threw a gold coin on the map to mark the hunting area. Then, Ai Lizi released a silver bird to scout the area, and finally, a spell was cast to settle it. Luoya wasn't surprised by the girls' achievements, but to the soldiers and guards, the two girls' abilities were quite amazing. After a series of operations, the team was overflowing with joy. Facing the proud girls who came to show off their achievements, Luoya could only praise them. Originally, the young lady wanted to accompany Luoya all the way to Audiobook Hill, but Luoya unexpectedly sent a letter urging them to hurry up. Both Luoya and Xia Luo were a little puzzled, but then the girl seemed to remember something. After comforting Luoya, she left in advance. In fact, Luoya was the same. When they were a week away from Audiobook Hill, a messenger in the convoy left in advance to inform Kadia. For the two who rarely spent time together, this holiday was a rare opportunity to get together. Life in St. Freya's Academy may be colorful for him. The glory of being the champion of the Challengers Cup also made him unparalleled in the limelight in Leinster, but these were not important to Luoya. Luoya liked the smell of paper and ink in the study of Audiobook Mansion. He liked the afternoon sunset in the bedroom where he grew up. He liked the refreshing tea that Anna brewed for him in the early morning. Perhaps these were not worth mentioning in the eyes of others, but to him, they were a portrayal of his daily life and a peaceful place to belong. Leaning against the back of the chair in the dining room, Luoya carefully tasted the black tea in his mouth. Behind him, Anna stood quietly in her maid uniform, telling the young man about the progress of Akate Hill. The silver-haired girl sat quietly by the side and listened. Before Luoya knew the details, Ai Lizzie wanted to hear the young man's honest evaluation from the heart. This was also an important reference for the girl to measure her value because Ai Lizzie could not accept that she was useless to her brother. Chapter 409. In the dining hall of Akate Mansion, the black-haired boy frowned as he listened to the maid's words. Beside him, Ai Lizzie also put down her teacup in surprise. Her heart was filled with questions. For a long time, Nuo Air had attached great importance to the exchange of letters with Luoya. Every month she would send 2 letters. This was a mandatory task that Nuo Air had put forward. There was no limit to the number of letters. It was said that it was necessary to ensure safety. Of course, most of the content had nothing to do with safety. It could be said that Nuo Air relied on a long time of persistent correspondence to suppress Ai Lizzie's many schemes. Every weekend, when the letter from the Holy Capital arrived, Ai Lizzie would grit her teeth, but there was nothing she could do. Because of this, Nuo Air attached great importance to letters. Needless to say, Luoya's birthday, even if it was an ordinary holiday, they would still write to greet her. This time, the boy had won the Challenger's Cup and returned, bringing glory to the entire Saint Maester Empire. How could Nuo Air not write a letter to congratulate her? The reason Nuo Air returned early this time was because of the awakening of her bloodline. Considering the safety issues and the many possible consequences, this matter had not spread. Adhering to the principle of keeping secrets, Luoya didn't even tell Ai Lizzie, so the girl didn't know about it. However, Luoya, who knew, was very worried. Writing a letter obviously didn't require a lot of energy or physical strength. Nuo Air couldn't be indifferent after learning that Luoya had won the championship. She would write a congratulatory letter no matter what, but under such circumstances, the boy didn't receive a letter. Could it be that something happened to Nuo Air? Young master, there is indeed no letter from Nuo Air in the recent period of time, but this is very likely due to the traffic in the Holy Capital. That's right. Because winter is coming soon. The Holy Capital is organizing an accelerated autumn harvest to make the last supply run to Tucker Fortress. During this period of time, the traffic over there is rather chaotic, so it's inevitable that the letters will be delayed. Hearing Anna's words, the black-haired youth who didn't know much about the situation in the Holy Capital finally heaved a sigh of relief. After thinking for a while, he decided to wait. In theory, Nuo Air's safety was guaranteed once they entered the theocracy. In the country where the Vatican was located, there was no force that could threaten Nuo Air, nor was there any force that dared to do so. Any cult that dared to do so would have been eradicated 1,000 years ago. Although there was something wrong with Earl Eric's family, Heathcliff and the Akate family were currently in an alliance. Brian wouldn't dare to act rashly, and from the perspective of benefits, attacking Nuo Air was meaningless. Moreover, even if these were not mentioned, in terms of influence alone, if the Eric family had really revealed their true intentions, the church would have been in chaos long ago. How could it still be so calm? No, it's nothing. Haha, it's itchy. In the current situation where there was a serious lack of information, in theory, there was no need to be overly worried. Luoya did have a bad feeling in his heart, but the youth didn't want to affect the atmosphere at home and make Ai Lizzie, who had just returned home, nervous. In the next few days, Luoya and Ai Lizzie entered a period of recuperation after a long journey. They didn't go out much. After a series of battles in the Challenger's Cup, the youth had a deeper understanding of his own strength, and he had the idea of advancing to a higher level. On the other hand, Luoya also made arrangements for Nuo Air. The youth didn't passively wait for news. Instead, he ordered the Akate family's intelligence personnel to set off on the first night to investigate the situation in the Holy Capital. Kadia came back. Chapter 410. The news of Kadia's return was a big deal for both the Akate family and Luoya. The logistics department, This seemingly inconspicuous department that was often looked down upon by new recruits who didn't know much about military affairs was actually very important in a war. A unit might dare to say that they could defend any place for 10 days, but no one dared to say that they could go without food or water for 10 days. Morale was something that couldn't be seen or touched, but it was the common goal of countless famous generals since ancient times. There were many ways to raise morale. For example, a winning streak could cultivate pride, loyalty could be cultivated through years of service, and even rewards could increase morale to a certain extent. However, to maintain morale, food supplies were indispensable. Luoya had seen throughout the history of 2 wars. The only army that could withstand all unfavorable conditions and still maintain a high level of cohesion, combat effectiveness, and morale was the army under the red flag. However, even those great men had always strived to fill their stomachs. After the news of Kadia's return to Akat City spread, the mansion could be said to be filled with jubilation. After Kadia, Luoya, and even Ai Lizi left one after another, Akat mansion was deserted for a long time due to the absence of their masters. Even the servants were a little uncomfortable, and the family's chef had been unemployed for half a year. Under Anna's leadership, the Akat mansion underwent a long period of cleaning and decorating. The furniture, armrests, and other items that were prone to defects were repaired. Antique decorations were also moved out of the warehouse and placed in the corridor. A bright red carpet was laid out all the way to the streets. As for Akat City, Luoya ordered a welcoming event to be held. Remember, on the other hand, Kadia didn't return alone. There were thousands of soldiers in Akat City accompanying him. These people were specially transferred by Kadia to his side, so that they could go home. This action won him a lot of prestige, and the families of the soldiers in the city were very excited. As the procession walked through the gate, the crowd was filled with excited shouts. Women were calling their husbands names. Children were waving to their fathers, and more family members were following the procession. In front of the square, Luoya and Ai Lizi were already waiting for them. Of course, the girl wouldn't say what she was thinking. Luoya had always thought that Ai Lizi was standing like this because she was his adopted child. When she was young, Luoya even talked to her about it. However, Ai Lizi firmly refused to change her position, and as time passed, Luoya got used to it. A few years had passed, and as an extraordinary, Kadia's appearance didn't change much. However, probably because of his frequent visits to the battlefield, his aura had become sharper, and the pressure he gave off had also increased. On the other side, Luoya and Ai Lizi also hurried forward to greet their elder politely. "Father, welcome home." "No, not at all." In front of everyone, Luoya and Ai Lizi bowed to Kadia in a standard manner, displaying the nobility's image to the extreme, causing the passers-by to exclaim in amazement. Meanwhile, Kadia looked back and forth at the two who cooperated well with each other and smiled. "Of course. When father wasn't around, Ai Lizi helped me a lot. And no matter what has happened, Ai Lizi will always be an important family member to me." Upon hearing Luoya's words, the silver-haired girl couldn't help but widen her eyes. Although Ai Lizi knew what Luoya was trying to say, this confession still made her blush and her heart palpitate. For the past 6 months, most of the people in Akat residence had been worried that Luoya wouldn't be able to resist the temptation and would abandon the silver-haired girl who had grown up with him. However, in Kadia's eyes, it was the exact opposite. This patriarch of the Akat family, who had led the Akat family for decades, wasn't worried about Luoya. Instead, he was worried about Ai Lizi. Ai Lizi could be said to be the most talented person Kadia had ever met in his life. In fact, she even exceeded his understanding. Even Princess Nua Ayer was slightly inferior to Ai Lizi. This was because Ai Lizi was younger, and in terms of appearance, Ai Lizi was often breathtaking and almost flawless. Chapter 411. In the dining hall of the Akat mansion, the black-haired boy looked at Kadia, who had just returned from the holy capital, hoping to get some information from his father. However, to his surprise, Kadia didn't give any answer to Luoya's question. "Yes, before leaving, he specifically told me to win the championship." Hearing Luoya's words, Kadia pushed the topic aside and didn't specifically ask about the reason for Nua Ayer's discomfort. At the same time, he looked at Luoya with a deeper gaze. As the saying goes, loyalty and filial piety are difficult to achieve at the same time. If Kadia insisted on getting involved in this matter, Luoya would definitely fall into a dilemma because he didn't know how to answer. Therefore, as a father, Kadia simply took the initiative to brush it aside. Kadia was actually very satisfied with this result. After all, in his opinion, as a frontline general for the current theocracy, unity and stability were the most important. Because everyone was lost in their own thoughts, there was a rare silence at the Akat family's dining table. Seeing this, the silver-haired girl took the initiative to start a topic. Kadia was taken aback when he heard this, but after thinking for a moment he smiled and said, "I'll remember it in 1 second." Kadia shook his head and explained the reason for Luoya and the others. Logistical supply seemed easy, but in fact it was a military operation with high requirements for discipline. During this process, the soldiers must march as quickly as possible under the premise of maintaining vigilance to reduce the loss of food on the way. Moreover, the team's reconnaissance ability was also very high. But it had to be said that even such conditions were only achieved after several years of road repairs led by Kadia. Otherwise, it would be a magical journey for most of the human armies to travel to the eastern region. In the case where there was no road, it was very likely that they would get lost. And getting lost in the desolate eastern region would often result in complete annihilation. In the past, Luoya only knew that Kadia was busy for the peace of the theocracy and even the human world. However, the youth did not know the specifics, and Kadia had never mentioned it. However, it seemed that after returning and learning that Luoya had won the Challengers Cup championship, and feeling that his child had grown up, the Marquis finally opened his mouth. In the past, as the successor of the Akat family, Luoya did not need such knowledge and experience to revitalize the territory. However, the Challengers Cup had changed Luoya's position. As an active general who was familiar with the situation in the eastern region, Kadia was now deliberately explaining to him so that he could be mentally prepared. It could be said that he had put in a lot of effort. Luoya was not the only student in Kadia's class, but also Ai Lizi. In fact, in Kadia's eyes, Ai Lizi was the one with potential who had yet to show her strength. With the girl's talent, once she entered St. Freya Academy and entered the public's eyes, she would definitely become one of the future hopes of mankind. It was beneficial to supplement her knowledge in advance. Anna the trophy. At Luoya's command, the maids respectfully brought the Challengers Cup inlaid with a pedestal to Kadia. The Marquis looked at the trophy that he was fortunate to see once decades ago, and his face flushed with excitement. That failure had a great impact on Kadia, making him more diligent in his youth. After a few years, he finally made a breakthrough in his extraordinary power. To a certain extent, the Challengers Cup was a competition that stimulated Kadia's ambition. Reaching out and stroking the 56 precious and small gems on the trophy, the middle-aged man's heart was filled with pride. He was happier than if he had won the prize himself, especially when he saw the words and signature on the back of the trophy. These words are only for the winner of the 56th Challengers Cup. Good, very good. By the way, Father, Teacher Chris may come to visit in a few days. She is an old acquaintance of yours from the academy, right? I wonder if it's convenient for you to meet her? The middle-aged man replied resolutely to Luoya's question. On the other side, Luoya and Ai Lizi looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. No matter how good their relationship with Teacher Chris was, they had to respect their father's opinion. This was the bottom line of Luoya and Ai Lizi as children. Fortunately, Kadia's impression of Chris was better than expected. Coupled with the bonus of the Challengers Cup championship, this might really be a chance. I understand, brother. Leave it to me. Silently cheering for their teacher in their hearts, Luoya and Kadia talked about their experiences in the competition for a while. It was late at night when the three of them returned to their rooms to rest. In the next few days, Luoya reported the progress of his extraordinary power to Kadia, and the progress he reported surprised the Marquis. Yes, I can be sure of this. Especially after the Challengers Cup, This feeling of saturation has become more and more obvious. In the past, Luoya's fast advancement speed could be attributed to his family's bloodline awakening late. However, Luoya had only been at source rank 4 for less than 2 years. It was indeed beyond common sense for him to advance so quickly. Thinking of this, Kadia's gaze changed a little when he looked at Luoya. Just like Xia's law, great power was inevitably accompanied by a corresponding price. Luoya's extraordinary power advancement was godly, so the risks he experienced were far from what ordinary people could compare to. However, these youngsters had never mentioned this to him. If Luoya had not understood things on his own when he was young, and if Luoya had not overcome many difficulties without guidance, Kadia might have regretted it for the rest of his life. Although there were countless high-level extraordinaires who had died at the hands of Luoya, this did not mean that Luoya was stronger than them in all aspects. In fact, most of Luoya's leapfrogging kills were done in the historical fragments. In the historical fragments, the ancient gods could slightly exceed Luoya's level and display greater strength. Under such circumstances, Luoya wanted to find an experienced high-level extraordinaire to guide him, and Kadia, as a veteran powerhouse of the second level of source rank, was simply the most suitable candidate. Through the explanation, Luoya also discovered the gap between himself and Kadia. While listening to the lecture, Luoya also understood Kadia's strength to a certain extent. If he guessed correctly, Kadia was probably a considerable expert of the second level of source rank. It was no wonder that he could become the chief of the conjurers. Moreover, according to his father, he had even defeated an expert from the Kingdom of Knights, Count Bastet's family, in the exchange competition between the two armies. After a few days of continuous teaching, the youngster found a direction to move forward. He once again entered the library to read, and at the same time, patiently waited for teacher Chris's arrival. However, although the plan was perfect, the changes were a step faster. Before teacher Chris arrived at Akkad territory, a convoy full of goods had arrived ahead of time. In the hall of the Akkad mansion, servants were carefully carrying all kinds of exquisitely packaged boxes, and opening them one by one to verify the items inside. Because the news of Luoya's victory was too sudden, the nobles of the theocracy were basically unprepared. However, as a group that had experienced countless events, the nobles also had a way of dealing with such matters. That was, they wrote congratulatory letters first and sent gifts later. As the recipient of the letters, Luoya also had his own tasks. On one hand, he had to write a reply letter after receiving the gifts. On the other hand, he had to evaluate the value of the gifts and record them down. On the next birthday, he had to send a gift of equal value or slightly higher than the other parties. Marquis Bafaz's house, a whole intact golden bearskin tapestry, decorative type, worth about 3,500 gold coins. Duke Lussen's house, 12 deer forest, decorative type, one of the representative works of the great painter Viking more than 200 years ago, worth about 5,000 gold coins. On the sofa, Luoya looked at the rare treasures one by one, sipping tea while listening to Anna's explanation. However, when it came to a small wooden box engraved with the emblem of the Heathcliff family, Anna's voice suddenly stopped. After a moment of silence, Anna came to Luoya with the box in her hand. The youngster's heart skipped a beat. He put down the teacup and looked inside. In the center of the mythical painting of the Holy See, a ring engraved with the emblem of the Heathcliff family was lying quietly on a precious red silk cloth. The moment Luoya saw the ring, his golden pupils suddenly shrank. The youngster reached out his hand to take the box and carefully looked at it. His face couldn't help but change and his eyes flashed. Holy See, John wants me to meet him? The youngster frowned and walked towards Kadia's room. Chapter 412. Not everyone in Xia could have a ring with the family emblem on it, because the family emblem represented authority, and giving it away was equivalent to giving away part of that authority. Although the Akkad family and Heathcliff family were allies, and Luoya had a good relationship with Old John, the boy was not narcissistic enough to think that Old John would give him the family emblem, and it was even more impossible that Old John would give him the family emblem. Although John of the Holy See was old, he was not an idiot. As an extraordinary, the older he got, the wiser he became. There must be a reason for his actions, and the most likely reason was to ask Luoya to take the ring to him. After thinking about it for a while, Luoya roughly understood John of the Holy See's intention. As proof, Luoya also found a congratulatory letter from Heathcliff, and a sentence in the letter immediately caught the boy's attention after receiving the ring. Under the guidance of glory? Haha, this is really the symbol of glory. Well, he probably wants you to go there, but I don't know what the Holy See wants you to do. What mission is it? Or is it? It's very likely. In that case, it's better for you to leave early. Your teacher will be here soon, so you can use this as a cover. Chris was not just any random person. He was one of the few sage teachers in the scholar nation. His future achievements in the education system were limitless. He was a great scholar that no one could invite. Normally, when a teacher of this level came to visit, the other noble families would at least gather everyone to show their respect, even if they did not welcome him with gongs and drums. Calculating the time, there were about 2 days before teacher Chris's arrival. After discussing with his father, Luoya decided to wait for the right time. Since John of the Holy See notified Luoya in this way, the requirement for secrecy was obviously higher than the speed of going there. Although Luoya didn't know what he would experience after going to the holy capital, one thing he knew was that he had to have the ability to adapt. In order to prevent any accidents, Luoya first gathered the pagan army of Akkad territory. Since they hadn't been in Akkad territory for a long time and hadn't fought in the country, the pagan legion didn't attract too much attention. Their identity as mercenaries was the best cover for them. The only one that could cause trouble for them was the Holy See. But in Saint Maester theocracy, which church would dare to cause trouble for Luoya? Under such circumstances, no one with a normal level of intelligence would bother Luoya. In fact, when they were in the north, the people of the Holy See had turned a blind eye to the measures taken by the Akkad family. Of course, although no one would cause trouble for them, the concealment of the pagan army wasn't up to standard. The most important thing for them to go to the holy capital was concealment. Fortunately, Luoya had some ways to deal with this. The Sorofia Chamber of Commerce in Saint Maester theocracy was the most important area of the Sorofia family other than Luoya's main store. The president of the Sorofia Chamber of Commerce in the holy capital, Alvin, was an old friend of Luoya. At that time, Alvin was optimistic about Luoya's future influence in the theocracy and provided him with a lot of help. After the marriage between Luoya and Xia Luo was announced, President Alvin looked at Luoya as if he had seen a treasure. During the holidays, he would think of ways to send gifts to him. During the development of Akkad territory, he also contributed a lot. Every year from late autumn to early winter was the peak period for the various chambers of commerce. A large number of crops needed to be transported to the city to provide for the needs of the people in the city during winter. In order to speed up the circulation and stabilize the prices, several large chambers of commerce had signed an agreement with the theocracy. Under such circumstances, in order to make up for the low sales and transportation costs of the chambers of commerce, the theocracy issued a 2-month pass. The purpose of this pass was to reduce customs duties, reduce customs procedures, and exempt from searches. This was what Luoya needed the most right now. After thinking for a while, the black-haired youth sorted out a plan and began to prepare in an orderly manner. Time passed little by little as Luoya's preparations were completed, until Chris's arrival. Chapter 413. A month's time? Perhaps it was because Luoya's expression was too solemn, or perhaps it was because Arvin himself had confidence in the Holy See. The middle-aged man added after this sentence. Well, I understand. Thank you for your help, President Arvin. The middle-aged businessman responded to Luoya's gratitude with a smile. His amiable look made people like him even more. The black-haired young man shook his head and sighed at the wily old fox. At the same time, he felt a little relieved. Nuwa Iyer was the princess of a country. If something happened to her, too many people would be implicated. It was almost impossible to hide it. Since the Sorofia family said that nothing major happened to the Holy See, then the situation with Nuo must still be under control. Luoya had the system, so he did not suffer much in the aspect of bloodline. However, many ordinary extraordinaries had to endure great risks and pain to upgrade their bloodline. Being bedridden for a month was already considered good. There was even the risk of failing the upgrade and losing their lives. If it were someone else in this situation, Luoya would probably think it was normal to not see him for 3 months, let alone 1 month. After all, compared with the power brought by the golden bloodline, anything was possible. However, everything was different when this person was a blonde angel. With a silent sigh, the black-haired young man entered the Chamber of Commerce to rest under the guidance of President Arvin. At the same time, he quietly waited for the arrival of the knight. With the royal family emblem ring, one could indeed meet John of the Holy See directly. However, if the operation was carried out secretly, it would naturally involve methods and methods. In the Holy City, the entire Holy See and the various departments of the palace had dozens of different organizations. Some of them were well known, while others were obscure. However, if Luoya wanted to meet John of the Holy See in secret, there was only one choice: the Inquisition, the headquarters of the judges. Most of the people in it were fierce, but they were also some of the most devout people because they were the warriors on the front line of the battle against the cultists. As part of the church's regular army, the inquisitors face far more danger than the ordinary army of any country. Ordinary soldiers fought on the battlefield, but to the inquisitors, they lived every moment of their lives on the battlefield. The number of inquisitors who died on the battlefield might not be more than the number of inquisitors who were assassinated silently in their daily lives. This was the consensus of the Inquisition. Every year, there would be new inquisitors who died outside of the battlefield due to carelessness. But even so, there would always be more inquisitors. Luoya had a very high respect for these warriors who had silently contributed in the darkness. Some of them had concealed their identities and were reclusive. Some of them had sinister and distorted faces because of the vicious curses. However, the nobility of the soul couldn't be limited by the physical body. In Luoya's eyes, they were all light. Only in such a place could he be assured to come. The Inquisition was an organization directly under the Holy See, and was directly responsible to the Holy See. Moreover, the inquisitors in the Inquisition were all military personnel. The importance of military secrets far exceeded that of other departments. If Luoya was John of the Holy See, he would definitely instruct the people here to contact him. The Inquisition was different from other organizations of the Holy See. There was no one guarding the entrance. In other words, there were no visible guards at the entrance. "Sir, please state your name, show me the relevant items that can prove your identity, and tell me the purpose of your visit," the young man said as he took off his hood and took out the identification card that he had prepared in advance. As he expected, the inquisitor at the entrance didn't show any surprise at Luoya's arrival. In fact, when Luoya heard his name, the inquisitor let down his guard. Yes. Today was different from the past. After winning the Challenger's Cup, Luoya's influence had skyrocketed. He had already become one of the representatives of the Holy Mestre Empire. His relationship with the royal family was also very close. It could be said that he was an upstart in the current era. And it was obvious that Luoya had already discovered them. If the young man spoke, even the inquisitors who were used to seeing storms and waves wouldn't be able to continue monitoring him. As time passed, the feeling of being watched by the young man gradually subsided. Not long after, the guard at the entrance returned and led Luoya into the depths of the Inquisition. The two of them passed through rooms and corridors one after the other, finally arriving at a dark room lit only by a lamp. In the depths of the room, a red-haired man calmly looked at Luoya with a serious expression. "Thank you for your kindness, Count Hanks. Please forgive me for my sudden visit. I have long heard of your great name, and it is my honor to meet you." As the person in charge of an important position in the Inquisition, although Hanks was one of the most important ministers of the Holy Mestre, he rarely appeared in public. In fact, this young man not only held a position in the Holy Mestre, but he was also a noble in the palace, and his title was a count. In just a short sentence, Luoya let the suspicious head of the Inquisition feel the full trust of the royal family of Hezekret. Hanks, who noticed this, changed his attitude slightly. He stood up and shook hands with Luoya. Yes, sir. Yes, it is a promise brought by a ring. I understand. Then Lord Luoya, please come with me. An hour later, Luoya secretly went to a familiar but unexpected place under Hank's arrangement, the palace of the Holy Mestre Empire. If the meeting was in the headquarters of the Holy Mestre, then Hardadef would be the Holy See, and Luoya would be facing a secret official mission. But if the meeting was in the palace, then Hardadef would be the king and the head of the family of Hezekiah, and this meeting would be more of a private one. The Palace of Saint Lorraine was well maintained this year. Legend said that the building, which had the same color as the feathers of angels, was as holy as ever in the winter night. The red-haired head of the Inquisition, Hanks, led Luoya into the empty palace. The guards around them had obviously been replaced by members of the Inquisition. From the perspective of having a close relationship with the royal family, Hanks, as a noble in the palace, should be close to Luoya. But for more than an hour, Luoya felt that Hanks was observing him more, and even a little wary of him. This word appeared in the youth's mind and he raised his eyebrows, but he didn't care too much. After all, skepticism was the judge's way of protecting themselves. If Hanks was so close to him that he couldn't wait to be sworn brothers, Roja would find it strange. I understand. Thank you for escorting me, Count. After tidying up his appearance and signaling to the guard at the door, the golden and mahogany door finally opened slowly. Luoya strolled into the room, found a guest seat, and sat down. He looked at the exquisite decorations on the wall and waited attentively. Not long after, the door between the thrones opened, and a white-haired old man walked into the room. Well, child, it's just the two of us here. You don't have to be so polite. Grandpa Hardadef, we haven't seen each other for half a year. How are you? The old man and the young man, who had not seen each other for a long time, exchanged a few pleasantries. The atmosphere was like that of a child returning from school and a grandpa next door, and Luoya was filled with emotions. Luoya cherished this kind of relationship between a senior and a junior. Looking at the smile on the old man's face, the black-haired young man finally felt a little more at ease. With this thought in mind, Luoya reached out and took out a wooden box, placed the ring with the Heathcliff family crest on the table, and then smiled bitterly. Haha, originally, after you won the Challenger's Cup, I wanted to invite you here openly. But something happened halfway, so I had to reduce the attention on you and make you come here secretly. It's my fault that you, the hero who won glory for the theocracy, didn't receive flowers and applause. Outsiders? Haha, that's not necessarily true. In fact, it was also Her Royal Highness' order that I won the Challenger's Cup. But after returning to the country, I heard that Her Royal Highness hasn't shown up in public for a long time, and I couldn't contact her through letters. Grandpa Hardadef, may I ask what is the Nuar Ire? Child, I know your concern. This is the reason why I asked you to come to the holy capital. Counting the days, Nuar Ire hasn't shown up in public for more than a month. It's inevitable that people are worried. Sensing the seriousness in the old man's words, Luoya couldn't help but raise his own speculation. Unexpectedly, the sanctum went silent. A bad premonition? The white-haired old man recalled the girl's situation and sighed. He looked at Luoya with a solemn expression and said, Nuar Ire is turning into an angel. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.